which is the 10-year plan monitoring report, report, year to date December 2015, and David, Tracy, and our former CFO will be presenting on behalf of Stephen, who unfortunately has had to leave. So we have the report on page 21. I'll ask the staff to speak to that report, deferring back to general managers as appropriate, and then we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Yes, as is a key theme of my report today, all plans don't mean that they come off at the same time frame. Steve had to leave today, and I'll struggle through his notes and his handwriting to make sure that I can deliver a good summary for you all. And we have our general managers here to answer some questions, as well as our new financial controller. So to the 10-year monitoring report, the first 6 months of the financial year maintains Council's favourable budget position. As discussed previously, it's attributed to higher than budgeted growth resulting in Council exceeding vested asset, DCs and planning and regulatory income. Largely as a result of this extra income, Council's year-end accounting surplus is projected to exceed budget by 13.8 million, and with the balancing the budget target exceeded by 800,000. Surplus funds are used to reduce debt. Year-end debt is forecast to be within the range of around 350 million, which is 57 million less than budgeted. The favourable position will be reflected in the starting position for next year's annual plan to be considered next week. There are two matters in this report which is different from previous reports. Number one, as considered in the last meeting, the procurement report has been removed from the agenda, and with much of the information to be placed on Council website. It is currently being proofed. Search procurement, this report provides a list of the top, inside this report provides a list of the top 10 contracts awarded this month within this reporting period. Secondly, we require a resolution to extend our committed bank facility for 2 years. This exceeds the current delegation, which allows for a 1+1 extension, as this is a 1+2. We recommend this change to align with our debt maturities within the Council borrowing policy. Finally, a focus for Council staff at the moment is a gap that is growing between our planned and our actual capital expenditure that has grown since our last report. Council has budgeted to complete 128 projects valued at 83 million, including 18 million deferred from the 2015-16 year. At the halfway stage of this year, we plan to complete 112 of those 128 projects, and those 112 are on budget. However, we've identified that 14 projects that are likely to be deferred, as well as an additional 2 that are likely to exceed budget. On that topic, I'd just like to invite our GM for infrastructure to provide some further clarification on those 16.
So, councillors, I'm talking to page 51 and 55 of the report, which has got the capital program. So, as the GM said, there's 16 projects in there which are signalled with the amber traffic light as requiring deferrals. So, I just want to quickly work through those 16 projects. A number of those projects relate to alignment with third-party developer programs, and some relate to individual projects. So I'll just talk about the third-party developer projects first, and the context I'll talk about is the growth sales that are in of Rotatuna, Peacocks, Rotokauri and Ruakura. So starting with Rotatuna, about $3 million of the deferrals are in the Rotatuna growth sale. It crosses, the projects there cross 4 programs of work, so stormwater, water, wastewater and transport. So if I've got a project that's delayed, it has an impact on 4 programs that you see in the report. So in the Rotatuna growth sale, there's 4 main projects that Council's engaged with, and those 4 main projects are the Ministry of Education collector road for the new school, the Borman Road extension in our partnership with Colin Litt and Rivington, a future partnership with Colin Litt to extend Borman Road to K Road, and the North City Road upgrade. So the first two of those projects are going very well, and the Ministry of Education collector road is finished and the school's open, so that project has gone really well. And the partnership, quite a significant partnership with Colin Litt to extend Rivington Road to a point, that's going very well and will be on track for completion this year as well. The two projects where we've got delays are the Borman Road West and the North City Road projects. So Borman Road West is a project in partnership with Colin Litt that we're working on to complete Borman Road right through to K Road. We're having to work a little bit at Colin's pace in terms of land acquisition and agreements. It's been complicated by integration with our Resolution Drive extension. So we're just signalling that there are some delays in working through that project to get the start line with Colin Litt. The second one is the North City Road. That's very much linked with the completion of the Rototuna Town Centre Comprehensive Development Plan, something that we're working on cross-organisationally with Kirkdale, and getting agreement on that structure plan and the town centre and the library and the pools. I understand that work is going well and coming to closure, but it is, our infrastructure program is aligned with completion of the comprehensive structure plan. We had anticipated when we set the 10-year plan a year or so ago that would be into North City Road and doing some work there, but it's likely to be into next year now. So the second major growth cell is the Peacock's growth cell, and about $1.5 million of the deferrals relate to that. So there's one project there which is about Peacock Stage 2. So councillors will recall that we've set aside some funding to deal with the impacts of our land designation, and that's in terms of property. So by designating the land, we inherit obligations to deal with people who want to sell their property to us. So there's a project in there which has got about $2 million to deal with property purchases that might crop up, plus some other works to mitigate, to start our mitigation works in accordance with the designations. So we've spent just about $700,000 of that $2 million at the moment with a property deal that we came to council and got approval on. We've got two more property deals that are just working their way through the process at the moment, but we're dependent on the timing of the property owners when it comes forward to council and we put the expenditure on that. The other part of Peacock Stage 2, so we've got three, Peacock Stage 1, sorry. Peacock Stage 1 affects three programs across stormwater, wastewater and transport. Once again, when we put our 10-year plan together, we had anticipated that the development community would be at a point in time when they could partner with us to put some infrastructure in there. That hasn't proved to be the case. I think the fragmented land ownership has been challenging, but that landscape is changing as other developers are coming in and looking at property. So very much will be required to unlock the rest of Peacock Stage 1. Just very unlikely that it will be this year now, so that's one of the signalled deferrals. There's just two minor ones in the other growth areas, one in Rotokowri, so it's about $500,000 there, and it's to do with the roadworks in the industrial area around Onion Road and Russell Road in that area there. So we had anticipated some options when we were doing our preliminary planning on this. There have been some recent issues with the railway crossing there and some difficulties with trucks, so we've deliberately are looking at some broader options there. So most of the money for that project is in next year and the year after. The funding in this year is for investigating and scoping. So we're just looking at a broader range of options. So we're just taking a bit more time to look at the options and some of the rail and Fonterra issues. The very last one is one project in Ruakura, about 300 to 400k deferral. It's for working with the developers there and Tainui and Chedworth on some of the water supplies to some of their development. So that completes the growth sales, and I'll just quickly go to the individual projects. So the first one, which is subject to a report today, is the Rotatuna Reservoir. So you'll see from the report today that we're asking for approval to let our last main contract. So that sort of puts the project back on time. It's just a question of whether we spend all of the money that we've got this year or not. But the project, I'll be speaking to that a bit more later on in the agenda. ICMPs, we've got quite a significant amount of money to complete ICMPs this year. We've just signalled that there may be a deferral on that, but at this point in time we will probably spend the money. We've just signalled that there may be a risk of not spending all of the money on ICMPs. The Ring Road, so we've signalled through reporting to council some potential delays there. The Ring Road is a different sort of project for us because any delays don't have any financial impacts because of the advanced funding agreement that we have with NZTA. So any delays are more related to community expectations and the expectations of finishing. So the other projects are quite minor in nature, so that is the main explanations for most of the 16 projects. I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you want to complete your report first, and then we'll come back to the questions?
Thanks, Chris.
David.
So, Mr Chairman, that's our verbal summary of the report. I'd like to recommend the resolutions on page 22, that the report be received and that the Chief Executive is delegated to approve the extension of contract 13077 87 committed bank facility by 2 years to a maturity date of the 10th of December 2019.
Thank you. All right, let's call for some questions. Councillor Mallett and then Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. At the last 15 December 2015, Council approved some significant funding, 4.1 million for remediation of Victoria on the river and 2.6 for an enhancements project from Victoria on the river. Can you just give us some disclosure or just a bit more clarity on when that's to be spent and where it's budgeted in our, I should be looking at you, where it's budgeted in our accounts?
I was just going to take the question and pass it off to the General Manager responsible.
Whack.
Just like that.
Yes, thank you. The project is underway right now. The first tranche of the project, however, is going to be going towards clearing out the site in terms of getting all the loose fill out and so forth. We're hoping to do that before the rainy season and winter starts.
Did you hear that stuff?
Yeah,
on
I
the
know.
roof now?
Yeah, I know. And then the actual rectification project won't happen until probably starting around August, September. So it will be spread out over the 2 financial years.
Okay. I did notice in the threats and opportunities, whatever that report's called, there was some allocation of money for these. So this work's going to be spread over more than 1 year, clearly. Is that right?
Yes, that's
And it's all unfunded. Well, when I say unfunded, it is. It's unfunded.
It's totally unfunded.
It's new stuff, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to find income to cover that.
It's reflected. So basically the decision of Council was to fund from debt, so it will be funded from debt and that'll be reflected in our opening balance sheet position heading into the annual plan discussion next week. So that's where you'll see it coming through at that point as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Councillor Mallett only got one question.
No, I'm just going to...
Don't encourage him.
Just organising my stuff.
He's just getting his
Crikey.
dig deeper.
Just on page 25, just on the 60 million, so that's 2/3 of the capital project still to complete. How confident, we've just heard from Chris, but how confident are we in completing those? And can you also answer how many from the list of still to complete are deferred from the last financial year, if any? I'm on page 25.
I think Chris can respond to his assessment of the likelihood of completing the program, because the majority of them sit in his area.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, we carefully monitor the progress of each project, both as a group and as SLT in preparation for this meeting. So what you're seeing now in that report is the 16 projects which we think will require some project deferrals. The report is as of December. I probably just was going to mention one more project that's not on the list, which would creep onto my list, but we already had that conversation this morning, and it was about the Low River contingency and some of those issues there. So that was another project that's not on this list, but is probably emerging as we won't spend all the money this year. In terms of your other question, I don't have the information with me, but some of those programs, and particularly the growth, will have carryovers from previous years. But all of those are essentially related to that third-party issue of just trying to align with the development community and keep pace with what they're doing on the ground.
We don't have a policy, do we, of if something's deferred 3 or 4 or however many years, that there really does become an issue with that project and it needs to be brought back to council? We don't sort of have a cut-off date, do we?
We do have a process through the chair, through the 10-year plan process, where all projects are reviewed, and every project needs to stack up. So if one project has continually been brought forward and hasn't been activated, or effectively delivered, staff need to justify why they want to continue to have that project in the program. So that's the process at the 10-year plan phase, and as well as the annual plan, there's an opportunity for us to revisit some of those ones that are.
So is what you're saying then is the maximum amount of, because we do a long-term plan every 3 years, the maximum time a project could sit in the deferred list would be 3 years? Yes,
but bearing in mind that we review this at every Finance Committee meeting and at the annual plan stage as well, if there's a significant item that we want to push out or push in, we have an obligation to make sure we inform council of that as well.
Yeah. Just a question on page 26, 39, the 350,000 for the purchase of new development contributions modelling tool. And this may have been a subject of a previous meeting, but can you just remind me what that is?
So basically, staff are looking at how we can best meet the demands required for a complex development contributions model. So at present we have a model. You'll be aware there is a development contributions working group that's looking at how best we can meet our obligations in that area, as well as how we can best work with the community. We've had some feedback from developers that our model is overly complex. We're looking at opportunities to work through that. So
this software, I'm assuming it's software,
yes,
is about managing the whole activity of DCs. It's not a tool that simply forecasts what it could or couldn't
so
be
this will have
budgets.
This will have two aspects to it. So we have a very robust model at the moment, so don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with our model, but this is looking for better ways of doing that. This tool will give us a better way of managing our development contributions, give us a better way of forecasting our development contributions, and off the back of it we can also use it as part of our growth modelling as well. So it provides a number of solutions that will make our forecasting a lot more robust.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Mellon.
Thank you. And this is just to provide a bit of clarity for other council members. Because of the failure to achieve our CapEx budget, we get into that situation again, and we've discussed this at the meeting this morning, where when we set our budgets every year, members, we estimate a capital expenditure budget. Most of that's funded by debt. We therefore a budget for a certain amount of interest to be charged to ratepayers. If that CapEx isn't done, the debt isn't accrued, it isn't incurred, and the interest is no longer is also not accrued. It doesn't occur to council, but we've still rated for it, haven't we? So you explained to me, and it has been discussed before, that what we do, or what we have done, is that there's a figure within our CapEx budget, and I appreciate this is very new to you as well. There's a figure in our CapEx budget which is effectively a guesstimate for how short we're going to be in achieving our CapEx budget, is it? Do you want to just give us some clarity on what the figure is, and how it's determined? Do we
I-
need Paul Conda, do we? Paul, where
I'm more than comfortable to respond to that question unless anyone else wants to jump up. So basically, Councillor Mallett is absolutely correct. When we're doing our capital budgets, we put a lot of effort into working with third parties, understanding where the developments
we
are.
know all that.
Yeah. I've got a lead in, Councillor Mallett. I've been around politicians a long time, so I just want to work on my lead in. So we do a whole lot of work up front. However, we can't always get it right. We assume, as you know, that there's always going to be a degree of deferred capital going into the following period. So we make an estimate of it, and it's approximately $10 million.
That's the capital portion.
Capital. Yep, that's right.
So if our interest rate was 4%, what you say is we reckon $10 million worth of capital won't get done, capex won't get done. Therefore, there's $400,000 worth of interest that probably won't be.
That's right, and we back that out
Okay.
from our task. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what is that? Do you know what the figure is? Because at the moment it looks like we're going to be $22 million shy, or I think that's what I'm reading. Yeah, I've annualised where we are now. So annualising it looks like we're going to be $22 million shy. Is it 10 million is the figure
Yeah,
we've got now?
that's 10 million, that's correct.
Okay. So the net result is that probably what is our interest rate roughly? Cost of capital?
Our long run average is about just over 5%, 5.5%.
Okay, so at 5%, that would be 20 million would be $2 million worth of interest if it's all incurred on day one.
Yeah,
I mean,
correct.
these are just very rough figures. So we tried to account for half of that roughly by 10 million. So we're possibly overrating by about $1 million a year at the moment, but we're trying, and I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm just trying to get a handle of what the figure is.
Our interest expense may well be over favourable by $1 million by the end of the financial year. Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just be helpful for one extra piece of information to that puzzle? The amount of money that Richard referred to, the $10 million, is our cost in terms of any project. So some of the projects that may be indicated as being deferred, some of that cost may not be cost that council incurs, such as Chris was saying, the ring road is not a project where we have anticipated borrowing at this stage. So it's the $10 million represents our share. So if the project has third-party contributions,
Okay.
it's only our share of those that project. So
We can have that information included in future reports, Councillor Mallett.
Pardon?
We can have that information
Thank
included
you.
in future reports.
Thank you.
You can make note of that, please.
So just on
Because it's
that,
material,
Chair,
it's really material.
because,
Yeah.
because we have this discussion frequently, and if you're going to include that information, I want that to be included in a form that properly explains what is happening. Because the majority of our large projects are partnership projects, and 9 times out of 10 for those larger ones, we're not in control of any of it. We are a contributor. And I think it's quite important that anything that's put in this report, sure, put it all in, is accurately reported and understood. Because I think it's quite easy to, take a view about stuff without the whole context. So if you're going to have a section in the report, I'm asking that you put the whole section in it and explain how it works.
Any further questions?
Is that someone's phone?
We're ready now to go to
Someone's phone
put
is
the
speaking.
recommendations from
Sorry,
Mallett.
does this include the risks and opportunities?
Is it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, sorry, I do have a couple of questions about risk and opportunities.
Gordon's phone.
Speaking, isn't it?
It's the deputy mayor's. He's denying.
I'm just trying to get a seat on Kiwi Air.
In the northwest
There's
corner.
none left.
And I'm sorry, we're full. Would you like to buy another aeroplane?
I'll take a
On page,
I'm happy to move the resolution.
Okay, I'm happy to accept that moving. Councillor Mallett indicated he's got one more question.
a couple more. Okay, this is risk and opportunity, page 58.
One.
The second item down there is pensioner housing, where we identify some, it's overheads, but it's stranded overheads. I'm just wondering, I assume that's Sean's department. It says, and says there's $75,000 worth of overheads which you couldn't allocate because we've sold the pensioner houses. Am I reading that right, Sean?
Look, I might, Blair's been working on pension and housing, but it
Oh,
won't
okay.
be, it won't be to do with corporate overheads.
Sorry,
It's to do
sorry.
with the strategic property. It'll be to do with corporate overheads for all of council that was assigned to that area.
Okay. So I guess my question is simply, what effort was made to identify and eliminate those overheads?
Can I respond to that one? Yeah, very good. I'm glad I'm sitting at the front, Councillor Mellett. I think we've been through, I'm not going to go through the overhead model, I won't start that story, we'll be here for a while. But part of the reason I undertook my support services review, Councillor Mellett, was to look for opportunities for efficiencies and so forth as a consequence of the decisions council makes. It's not a direct, because the model's allocated on averages across the organisation, there's not a direct correlation of one person sitting in the accounting team that works on pension and housing, there's a number of them. So the support services review was our mechanism for doing that, and it's an ongoing process. When we make these decisions, I ask the organisation to consider opportunities for further efficiencies.
Okay. Is there a reporting process for that? I mean, that to me is critical, because this is not a tainted statement, but we carry an awful lot of overheads in this organisation, and we get a bit protective of them in that we, we've got lots of our assets and our activities carry extraordinary overhead costs. We seem, and we often argue that, no, we can't get rid of that because we'll still hang on to the overhead cost. And I just want to know to what degree we try and do get rid of overheads.
I think I'll go back to that support services review.
Yep.
So part of that support services review probably validated that we're thereabouts in most places, lean in some. We did some benchmarking. What I committed to when I presented that support services paper with Eon was that we would continue the drive for looking for efficiencies, and one of the challenges that the GM corporate will have as part of his remit for his group, because part of my logic for what you're trying to achieve was to put it all under one person to drive some efficiencies into it, will be that there will be an ongoing updated report on a regular basis. We haven't worked out what the rhythm of that will be, whether it's annually or 6 monthly, back to this council, or back to the committee, sorry, to give you that confidence that we are looking in those areas.
Okay. So it's, and I know it's very difficult, but somewhere along the line you stop an activity, and suddenly, it was a tenth of a person's job, then it's 2/10, and suddenly
you're being on.
There's a person that's no longer required, or there's a space that's no longer required, there is a car that's no longer required, and I just want to make sure we've got
absolutely
processes that trigger that, and tough decisions are made.
Rest assured they are, Councillor Mellett.
Okay. The fourth, come down to Victoria, so we're on page 58, under the heading community, it's the fourth one, One Victoria Trust Grant. We've got a positive there, although it is a negative, looks to be a negative. Shouldn't that be a positive? Anyway, that's $75,000. It's not been paid out because they haven't done their earthquake work. I'm not sure what responsibility we have, Sean, but I assume the reason we put those grants in there was that it needed to be done. Who's checking to make sure it does get done? What's our liability? What leverage do we have to demand it get done?
Well, our obligation is for that $75,000 grant, should they use it against the terms of the grant. They haven't used it, their time frame is still not due for them to come to us with their proposal as to how it will be used, but we're holding this effectively as a reserve so that it's in place for should they wish to use it. If they don't use it, it will obviously be returned as a positive variance.
Okay, so I may misunderstand. I thought part of the deal with us gifting the property to them was we said, and you must upgrade for earthquake stuff, and we will give you 150k over 2 years.
Yeah, that's correct, but we need to see what their plan is and when they're going to do it.
Okay, is there no time, there's no urgency on this?
No, there is a time frame to it. I can't recall it offhand, but I think it's 2017-18. And you will recall, I think last week you asked for, or earlier this week, you asked that we get an update on that. And
okay, have we had it?
I haven't got it yet, but I will get it to you.
Okay. Okay, do you want to talk about that big loss on?
You wanted a 15-minute explanation? I'm not sure that it is of any value to the rest of the
It's a big
council,
money.
but
It's big. Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallett. So Her Worship the Mayor has proposed a recommendation from management on page 22. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second.
Councillor Forsyth. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor King?
I'll be voting against the motion, as I reasonably consistently have on this issue. I just want to take this opportunity to remind councillors around this table of those who, in the last elections 2 years ago, said that they wouldn't increase debt, and promptly halfway through this term agreed to increase debt by $60 million. Next week, we'll be looking at the annual plan, and some of the members around this table will be like children in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, trying to spend up large and get rid of the surplus. I'd just like to remind you that to check yourselves. There's nothing wrong with running the books well. There's nothing wrong with having a lower debt than what we agreed to, and we don't have to take it up to the ceiling every time we have an annual plan review. There are things that the city does need, which help the city to grow, which bring in development levies, and which increases the rate take. I've got no problem with that. I also understand we've got to do things around the city to keep it clean, to keep it working, and to keep people feeling good about Hamilton. So there is a balance, but we don't have to spend it for the sake of spending it, just because it's there. The day of Armageddon is not upon us. We can actually not spend everything that's in the kitty. So just a reminder for next week. Thank you.
Any other speakers? I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I don't think I will be Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory next week, but council financial results continue to report well ahead of budget, and the reason for that is quite simply that the city is growing, and if you look at the financial accounts, you'll see that the additional revenue from budget is coming exactly from that growth. And I think that puts us as a responsible council under pressure to ensure that we focus on those growth areas, and that where it is necessary and where it is also it makes business sense in terms of working closely with developers, that we make sure that we put and we fund the infrastructure that's necessary to not only achieve and maintain the growth that we're having, but also make the city a livable city. So I, for one, will be actively engaged in next week's annual plan debate, and I will be focusing on why the city's growing and what we need to do as a responsible group of councillors and city leaders to make sure that that growth continues. Okay, so if there are no further speakers, and the Mayor, you don't wish to speak to the recommendation?
Sorry, can I just, there's no explanation required on the second part of the recommendation?
Yes, there is. It was covered in David's report.
Right.
Yep. And it is covered in the report here, I think on page.
That's cool.
Yeah, okay. All right, so those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillors Wilson, Tooman. Oh, yes, yep. Green, O'Leary, Worship the Mayor, Councillors Forsyth, Gallagher, Yong, Chesterman, Mr Chairman and Councillor Mallett.
Those against?
Councillors McPherson and King. Carried 11 votes for, 2 against.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is item 9, which is the Claudelands report. Sean is going to report. To speak to the report. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. This is the first iteration of a quarterly report, specifically on the Claudelands Event Centre. The report is still a work in progress. You'll find a lot of the information that's in the report you have seen already with regard to the financials. However, there are some new sections in the report which give you an indication of the level of hire days, the attendance numbers, and also where we're forecasting our activity to be. I would like to stress that our intention is to make this report a lot more robust than it currently is, so that we can get a lot more sort of non-financial data that will give you some sort of good set of KPIs as far as we can do that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions? Sorry, Councillor Mallett, you had your thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Rob. I just noticed in paragraph 1.1 that Claudelands has managed to attract 770,000 visitors. That's astonishingly low. I mean, over a 5-year period, when I owned a gym, we would have had about twice that. We'd have had about 1.5 million visitors, and that ratepayers didn't have to pay anything to support me. Why is that? And you seem, I don't want to taint it. You're happy with that? You think that's satisfactory?
No, we always want more. There's no doubt about that. But from a business perspective and the type of business that we're operating, we will always be striving for growth. We have plenty of utilisation opportunity. Whether that's off par where it should be, I think we've done extremely well, starting from just about a zero base. It probably would have, the numbers would have come on a little bit better if we'd had stronger activity in the exhibition space where you get the very, very big volumes. But at this stage, we're never happy with the result. We always want more. But I'd just beg the question, it's a very different business to a lot of other businesses in terms of the numbers of people that would go through.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's a big miss on revenue. That's 12% down. I guess against budget. And that's a continuing trend. It seems to be trending down. If you look at that little graph in there. I mean, this year it looks like, we might, well, I'm just annualising the figure in your on 4.1, which is 78,000 over 6 months. That annualises out to 156,000 people, which is, below the long-term trend. So it's bad and getting better.
Well, as I said, the exhibition activity, which delivers a big volume of the number, has been slower than we've normally had in the past. In terms of the budget revenue, yes, we are down, and we are looking to fall short of budget. We're still going to be on track with the year before, but that's not to take away the fact that our budget of a 12% growth in revenue is probably overly optimistic.
Okay. Do you have a plan to improve attendance and revenue, and when should we expect to see this plan implemented, and when should we expect to see the results?
Well, the plan is implemented and the plan's underway. I mean, we're working very hard to get as much business as we possibly can. We're very pleased with our conversion rates at the moment in terms of inquiry to taking it through to a firm booking. So, look, it is work in progress, and we have a number of initiatives that are in place out there in the market. We are subject, like any business, to the vagaries of the market. However, we do believe things are quite strong. The mix is actually a little bit different. The strength of the forward projections into next year, for example, is really carried by the conference and meeting sector. Now, that is actually lower in terms of number of people attend, but it's actually higher in the revenue take. So it's that changing mix that we're just grappling with at the moment.
So when you talk about change in mix, this is because your report talks about exhibitions and entertainment performance. You almost are not putting words in your mouth here, so I shan't. I'll try and use your exact words. With regard to entertainment performance, I'm looking at paragraph 4.3. You finish off, however, the primary challenge is that of promoters' assessments of the size of the Hamilton Waikato audience as it relates to bigger competing destinations around New Zealand and across Australia. That's something totally out of our control, isn't it?
Look, it is to an extent, but we're working really, really hard to turn that perception around because, as I've said previously to councillors, A big chunk of our effort is to ensure that we get the biggest possible crowd if you're talking about a performance event in the arena. So we work awfully hard with the promoter to try and get the numbers. And our big selling tool has to be that Hamilton can actually deliver the numbers, Hamilton can deliver a full house. So last weekend, for example, we had the equine shows staged over Friday and Saturday. Our team did an enormous amount of work along with the promoter to really ensure the numbers came through. We came in ahead of the promoter's expectations with over 2,000 people on Friday night, and we had a full house on Saturday night, which certainly blew the promoter's expectations away. And the feedback from that promoter, who's Australian-based, has been they were surprised at the numbers and they're coming back. So we do have good stories. Disney on Ice was an example 2 years ago, a year and a half ago in terms of the numbers. And what we need to do is just work that harder and get that reputation, and that perhaps the Hamilton and Waikato is actually a good market catchment, bearing in mind that a lot of the promoters are used to going to major cities around the world with their various shows.
Yeah, okay. And I respect you guys are working as hard as you can and, you know, doing everything you can, but the trend is still downward. And then against that, you've got an avalanche of competition coming up against you. I mean, you've got the Auckland Casino Convention Centre that's going to get built sometime. Rob was telling me there's a new one at the the airport, South Auckland. You know, there's Christchurch, Dunedin, Queenstown, at least. Now, some of these are in planning stage, some of these are going to go ahead, some of them won't go ahead. But we're looking at a situation where, you know, in a country the size of 4 million people, the number of convention centres could double in the space of a decade. And in 10 years' time, Claudelands will be 16 years old or whatever. And you're going to be up against, you know, prettier girls on the block.
Well, that is the nature of the business. It's the nature of the beast, and there's no hiding from that. If I could just sort of make a couple of comments, and I have said this before, in the case of Auckland, yes, that is going to be a huge amount of additional capacity. However, I would say that the nature of the convention centre in Auckland and the nature of of Auckland as a destination for that sort of activity is not necessarily that closely aligned to the sort of market that we are able to attract. Their market that they have been stating quite openly is in the Asian market, which is an area that we don't go to or don't work on. It's also fair to say that while something is brand new, yes, people will try it out, but there are also a lot of potential clients out there and existing clients that we have that won't go to a casino conference centre. So yes, it's definitely going to have an impact, but there's also other trade-offs and there's other segments that they won't touch that we can. In the case of Wellington, yes, it's under planning. It's been under planning for a long time and still not quite moving. In the case of Christchurch, if you read recently, it's been on the delay again, but Christchurch will definitely have a big impact on us and on the market in terms of extra capacity when it happens. The question is, when will it happen?
Okay. Okay, I guess, you know, projections are great, but what we're looking at is a business, putting it brutally, that appears to be declining.
I disagree. Our numbers are still on track with previous years or last year. What's in decline is our result against our budgeted 12% growth in revenue.
But it seems our attendance is dropping. It seems that, you know, even if you look at our performance, okay, our revenue's down, our expenses are down, and that's because some of the personnel cost, because the revenue's down, personnel cost, that's a direct cost. And the only bright item here is the fact that some of our assets have got a longer life, and so therefore we don't have to depreciate things quite so much. You know, that's not an operational gain. I know it's not a bad thing for the city council that the building's not wearing out as quickly as it was, but it's not suggesting to me that the centre is operating any better or any more profitably.
All I can say to that, Councillor Mallet, is that we are trimming our cloth to match the revenue challenge that we've got this year, and so operationally we have secured savings to offset that shortfall in revenue at an operational level.
Yeah, I just have this vision of the big events centre sort of circling the plug hole. I just can't see. I can't see it being turned around. I mean, it's.
Look, I don't see it like that, and I certainly can tell you now our clients don't see it like that. Our reputation is getting stronger and stronger. This is a tough business.
Why isn't it reflected in why isn't it reflected in the figures then? If our clients are passionate and love us and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not trying to be condescending at all. If you're responding like that, it should be showing up on that top line called revenue.
Correct, and as I've said, we are holding our own on revenue, but we are not achieving the growth that we projected.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes, a question. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Sean. In your years of experience, would you know how to unbuild Claudelands?
No. Well, actually, yes, but...
But basically you're saying that we can't undo what we've done?
I don't think so. I mean, the only other option you have is to find a whole new purpose for the building and what you can do with that. You do have some limitations with the requirements of the land that it occupies and so forth, but the issue of what you could do with the building as an alternative, difficult to foresee.
And has anybody approached us to buy it?
No.
Right. So we're sort of stuck with it.
Yes.
And we're probably best to do just the best we can.
I think our job has to be to make the best of it that we possibly can and get the benefits and the reasons that the facility was built in the first place delivered to the city.
Any further questions? Councillor Gallagher.
Councillor Mallett talked about the Auckland, scenario around competition. Is there any sort of tensions or not with, say, the Mystery Creek? And it's a slightly different purpose. And then I'm thinking of anything on the, you've got the velodrome, you know what I mean? You've got other sort of kind of facilities, and inevitably, in terms of rooms, you're competing with the stadium, and in terms of the variety of different, there are a range of choices.
Yeah, look, there will always be some tensions from time to time, but I would want to stress that the working relationship we have day to day with Mystery Creek is actually very, very strong, and we're working, both us and them are working hard for the two venues to work together as much as they can, where they can. An example of that was Field Days last year, where we did a joint venture and staged the 7 Days comedy show at Claudelands for a sit-down dinner. Once again, we had a almost full house for that, and that was a cooperative venture between ourselves and Mystery Creek, which was a great opportunity to actually bring Mystery Creek into the city. So we will always be exploring other areas where we can do some work. They have taken a little bit of business off us. We had a motor caravan show that had been at Claudelands for a couple of years, and it's now returned to Mystery Creek, and that's part of the swings and roundabouts. But we definitely do our best to work together where we can.
Generally speaking, and don't misperceive, I'm not, advocating writing the cheque at all, but what are the other enhancements? Because I know, there's other broad stuff, in the mix. What are the other enhancements, if you like, that might sort of make Claudelands more appealing? And I'm not saying it's not appealing, but I'm just saying would assist.
You've asked me a difficult question. I think, look, I would say the key thing that we do need is hotels. We still lack hotels in the city, and we still have a struggle at times for certain conferences to come here when there's a limitation on the amount of hotel rooms that we have. As a part of that, we actually target a lot of conferences quite specifically where we know the conference goers or the meeting goers actually will be conducive to staying in motels, for example. So we do work quite hard on those sorts of segments where we can. But the availability of hotel properties in the 4.5 star range remains a challenge for us. The second big challenge, and I'd hate this to be read the wrong way or put the wrong way, is that we still have to work hard to convince people that Hamilton is a destination to come to for meetings. And where we have success in achieving that is because of the strength of the standard and the diversity of the Claudelands operation. We are having to sell Claudelands first and the sizzle of Claudelands and what it can deliver in Hamilton second. So one of the things that will be good in the future is where people think about Hamilton, I want to go to a meeting in Hamilton. and we still have to do a lot of work to get to that point.
Just around, second quick question, the proximity also of accommodation near, the site, and I know there are obviously developments I'm observing across the road, which seems positive actually. Is that a factor, or is it the main thing is just doesn't matter that the beds are 100 metres away, it's just actually having the beds?
It's having the beds is the main issue, and having the right beds, and as I say, another 4.5-star hotel or 2 more hotels would help us greatly. But let's be clear, Clauden's alone won't support that type of investment, and the rest of the work that we do in a much broader sense outside of Clauden's, especially through our business visitation activity or our event tourism and so forth, that's all part and parcel of the broader package that will help provide the economic case for more hotels.
And obviously Kerry Gilter and her team at Tourism Waikato are right in there.
Correct.
And thank you.
Any further questions? Your Worship.
What's the revenue increase actual in percentage terms since opening? Because I'm looking at the graph on page 72, it's repeated on page 73.
Look, I would have to be...
Actual against...
I don't have that figure, but I'd have to be guessing that. But effectively, if you look on the graph, we've sort of gone roughly from 2.25 million to around 3.25 million in revenue.
Yeah, no, I was interested in the year-on-year increase in revenue because no, not according to the graph.
Isn't last year 1.9 million and this year it's 1.8 million?
I'm looking at the graph against revenue to budget. Is that...
that's 2.2.
Yes, so I'm looking at this graph on page 72, which is the same graph, I think, on page 73, right?
I think, Your Worship, if you look on page 71, there's actually a set of accounts there.
No, I'm looking at the year-on since opening.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry.
Okay?
Yeah, but there's a number of years on the graph.
And the question I asked was what was... because that, to me, says there's a budget for revenue set, and in previous years that has been exceeded. Am I right? Am I reading that correctly?
You are.
Right, and the question I asked was, what has been that budgeted, or in actual terms, percentage increase each year? And you said you don't have those figures at hand.
Look,
okay?
no,
I get that. Because I'm interested in the 12.3%, because it was set by your team. Just remind me, because Disney on Ice, the way I read this and what I know about conference venues is, it's not flat, is it? It's a lumpy industry.
It's extremely lumpy.
Yeah. And you can, if you have a big show, that makes a difference. And of course, Disney on Ice last year was an unbelievable success story. When's the Ice Age show coming? Is that this financial year or next year?
That's this financial year, the end of this financial year. But once again, we factored in with our budgeting the fact that the Ice Age was coming along.
Yeah. And that was based on the experience of Disney on Ice and how successful that was?
Look, no, our projections were basing it on our expectations for that particular event.
All right. Because it'll be interesting to see how you end up
with
your final year. You talked a little bit about, factors that challenge this lumpy industry. Just in a nutshell, what are the things that, in your view, you talked about hotels, but I'm more interested in attraction of particular sorts of events, because in 4, you talk about some of the things that are moving up and down, the sorts of activities that go on there and the trending in those activities, because some are more lucrative than others, right?
Yes.
So can you just sort of explain how that works? Because I'm not sure that everyone understands that just by having an event there, you might have lots of people, but the return might be small, and smaller events might give higher returns. So
yeah, you're correct, and that speaks to that comment I made earlier on about the conferencing and meetings segment of the market, which is growing for us as a much smaller number of people, but certainly a higher return or a higher yield. In terms of the major events that are very high profile and so forth, they are not necessarily high yielding in comparison at all. and some of the events that we have in the arena deliver what I would call very low margin, if that, because of the nature of that event. But obviously we stage them for the sake of utilisation, for the benefit of the sport or the community.
Right, okay. Exhibitions, which are like your expos and things, they are
Yes.
across New Zealand declining.
Correct.
And what's the sort of reason for that? Is
Look,
it cyclical or is it?
Look, it's hard. We've had quite a few discussions with people. It's not just New Zealand. It's also happened in Australia and probably in a much more dramatic effect over there. I think people are there are so many events, so many things to do, and the exhibition space, people have become a little bit tired to it. There was a few years there where there was a rush of different types of exhibitions, and really I think the market has just shrunk for that. So I think it's a market demand issue, and probably there's just been a saturation in the market which has turned the market off. I wouldn't say that's necessarily so much for Hamilton, but certainly for other centres it has been quite big. But that spills over to whether or not a promoter decides to do an exhibition tour through the country. One thing I would say on that though is for a lot of our meetings work, and for some of the bigger clients that are coming in with the 500 or 1,000 plus type numbers for the conferences, they're bringing their own mini exhibitions with them. So it's quite common for us to have a major conference taking place in the venue, but there's an exhibition area in the public hallways immediately outside, and we're seeing more and more of that. And we have some clients that have actually taken out the entire exhibition halls as an adjunct to the conference itself.
Okay, so when you are developing up every year, or I guess being flexible to respond to emerging trends, because I'm sure that trend wasn't around a couple of years ago, but it's an emerging one. What's your strategic pitch in terms of delivering a good outcome for this significant investment? Is it high yield? You know, what's your priority? Is it yield? Is it numbers? I mean, you know, it's an eclectic mix in a small city, isn't it? Because you've got to try and please everyone. Yeah. But what's your strategic focus? My
objective, or my goal and my dream is, for, in a financial sense, for us to be at the very least operationally break even, so that we can at least get at an operating level a positive return and then build from that. So that's the first big threshold we have, and we have had some gains in that area. The second really is getting in events and of some sort, whether it's a conference or whatever, that's going to deliver overnight stays. So when we look at doing a lot of stuff at the arena from time to time, quite often a decision we might make, especially when it comes to sports events, and this is not just Claudelands, this applies to Waikato Stadium as well, and even Seddon Park, is how much is that going to give us in terms of overnight visitation, where people from outside of our economy, outside of the Hamilton and Waikato economy, are going to come into town and spend some money. So I think that's that second aspect to what sort of drives us, is getting that overnight stay. Right. If we can get a client coming in for a half-day conference or a one-day conference, that's great. But if we can get a client coming in for 3, 4, 5-day conferences, that's just hugely better.
And conferences give you a higher yield than some of these other activities that might go on?
Yes, they basically spend more money. Simple as that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions of General Manager? All right, well, the recommendation on page 69 is that the report be received. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tooman. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Sure.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Look, this has been the most depressing 15 or 20 minutes of questioning of a general manager that I can recall in a long time. We've got councillors actually trying to destroy the reputation of Claudelands. And it's only been open...
Excuse me, point of order. Point of order. When you make an accusation like that, it'd be good if you put a name down, because a whole lot of people spoke, and some people will be wondering, who are you talking about?
I'm quite happy to identify you, Councillor Mallett.
So you consider holding a general manager to account, doing a proper governance job that we are elected to do, It's a sad, and were you involved in setting up the Claudelands thing, were you? Do you know anything about it?
Order.
No.
Embarrassing?
I don't know anything about it then.
No, you weren't there, were you, Gordon?
Order. I'd ask you to let the Deputy Mayor continue.
Oh, sorry, beg your
Yeah,
pardon.
and then you can enter the debate afterwards.
Thank you.
Councillor, Deputy Mayor Chesterman would like to...
The point that I want to make is that this is a still relatively new business, and I believe that it's been an outstanding facility for the city. We are now on the conference map. Conferences that have previously avoided Hamilton because there has been no facility to run those conferences. We've had international performers at Claudelands that would never have come to Hamilton before. So this is actually about providing a quality of life in the city for people, for families, for individuals to enjoy entertainment, whether it's sport or music or other performance, and that we have made that possible. Conference market is a difficult market, but it's one that takes 3 to 4 years of planning for major associations to decide the venue 4 years ahead. And I think we're now poised to be able to take advantage of that market that does long-term plan. So we're getting the business. We need more, certainly. But I think the more we criticise Claudelands within our own confines, the more we are damaging its reputation. Now, if you look at the FMG Waikato Stadium, we don't hear people talking about it still has debt, it still costs us $800,000 a year in interest payments, or whatever those payments are, yet it's a stadium that is highly regarded throughout New Zealand. And many of us have enjoyed entertainment, rugby, football, rugby league at the stadium. So I think the city could have done Claudelands in a different way. It should have and could have been a regional facility funded by the other local authorities. And some of the older standing councillors will recall that I was one of 2 people who voted against Claudelands. So I feel quite comfortable in talking about it. It's now my job as Deputy Mayor and a councillor to champion Claudelands, to champion it throughout New Zealand so that it's a place for others to come to the city and do business, to stay in our hotels and motels and to enjoy our hospitality sector. So I just want to reiterate my disappointment at the way in which the General Manager is continually interrogated by just one councillor, Councillor Mallet, and all of his questions today could have been asked offline instead of boring the rest of his colleagues here.
Point of order. I'm one of the councillors and I was not bored.
Okay, well, I'm pleased to hear that. I'm pleased to hear that. So that if you have all of these questions, why don't you ask them offline instead of capturing the entire council meeting with your 50 or 60 questions showing how much you understand the financial process? Why don't you champion the stadium instead of destroying it?
Right, I have next speaker is Councillor McPherson and then Councillor Mallet.
Thank you. I am appalled at the speech I've just heard from the Deputy Mayor. While there may be some things that questions and issues that Councillor Mallet has raised that I disagree with, some even I may fundamentally disagree with, it's not only his right to ask those questions in relation to a major piece of infrastructure like Claudelands, it's his duty as a councillor, if he thinks they're important, to raise them in a public forum, not offline. And in case Councillor Chesterman has not been reading the media recently, he will see there is quite a bit of concern expressed in the media about the amount of council business that is being done offline. Let's have it out in the open. Let's have it in formal meetings, and then let's have those discussions. I don't think and we saw an example earlier today that many of Councillor Mallett's views will be voted for by a majority of council, but they should be put out there, and I'll certainly defend his right to ask the questions about that. So that's one thing. Secondly, in relation to Claudelands, and I should say that I regard the speech by the Deputy Mayor as an attempt to imply some sort of moral gagging on another councillor who has that right, in my opinion, to ask questions. And whenever I hear someone being told off for asking questions in here, my hackles rise, because that is the problem, one of the problems that I've seen in all my years in councils, the great knocking machine, not against the person who's asking, the council, but against the person who's rocking the boat and asking the difficult questions. Now, in relation to Claudelands, I have some concerns as well, and I voted for Claudelands at the time, and I voted for Claudelands partly because I was assured that that was part of a suite or package of infrastructure that was going to be put in place to improve the quality of life of Hamiltonians. Claudelands and the Waikato Stadium, and I'm not going to give it the dignity of a sponsor's name in front of it, it's the Waikato Stadium, they're both there for elite sport. They're not there for the quality of life of ordinary people. In fact, of ordinary Hamilton residents, in terms of quality of life, the Claudelands Stadium is actually improving the quality of life of people from all around New Zealand who come to it, but it's very expensive for most Hamiltonians to get there. And it's especially extremely expensive if you run a sport or an arts organisation, a community-based one in the city. You can't afford to hire it, and you can't afford the whole cost structure of it. And I have some major issues with Claudelands when I look at that, having been in the position of running events in the city and not being able to afford to use Claudelands. It is not the multi-purpose facility that some in the community believed it should be, and it has not been followed up by the all-round community facility package that we were promised at the time. So I have a different view from Councillor Mallett about some of those sorts of things, but he has the right to raise those questions, and I have the right to be critical of Claudelands because it doesn't deliver an improved quality of life for the majority of Hamilton residents, in my opinion. That is not to criticise the individual staff that are involved with it. They're making the best of a bad deal. But this Claudelands, you have to admit, is costing city ratepayers a lot of money, and city ratepayers are not getting much direct benefit out of it.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I frequently disagree with what Councillor Chesterman says in the chamber, but I've always felt he had a right to say them. Some of the stuff's quite childish and petulant. But I thought today what he said just exposed that he's totally unsuited to a position in a government's body. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, he disqualified himself for standing an election. I mean, if you cannot understand your role on the governance body is A, to represent your constituents, and B, to hold the executive to account, you are way off base by a million miles. And it saddens me because you've been on the place for a long, long time and your fingerprints are over an awful lot of very, very poor decisions made by this council. It's probably not appropriate to personalise things, but the council makes decisions based on majorities. You're a very eloquent speaker, Gordon. You have influence in the chamber, but when you try, and thank you, Dave, for defending me. I didn't need it, but thank you. I appreciate that. I certainly hold it as part of my responsibility and duty to undertake the sort of questioning that took place with Sean. I hope it wasn't offensive. It was never meant to be offensive. It was meant to be direct and clear so that I could ask a clear question, so that I could get a clear answer, an answer that my colleagues around the table could understand, and that's what I think I got. I'm very, very comfortable with everything I spoke to with Sean about. To say this stuff should be offline is just absurd. That's exactly what should not happen. This stuff has to be exposed to the sunlight, and that's part of our responsibility. Gordon, I'm sorry, but you've got a great big fat fail today.
All right, Councillor Gallagher, can we stick to the
Yes,
topic,
yes, and I
which
wasn't
is
going
the
to enter
report
this-
on Claudelands?
this discussion, but I'm inspired obviously by the
So
Deputy
if you
Mayor.
could stick to the
I
Claudelands
think,
report.
The issue, however, is, no one doubts the Deputy Mayor's passion and advocacy and his contribution to the city, and that's where I respectfully differ with Councillor Matt. I think Councillor Chesterman's footprint is huge in the city, and I honour and acknowledge that. I think the issue, however, and this is the problem we have as a public body, which we should be, we happen to own, so if a board of directors is running another event, it would all be closed session, and there'd be no sort of, the board, trust me, would get to it with the senior manager. The problem we have is for the public and the media not to misinterpret our robust, legitimate questioning process, which we should do in my view, and I do agree with Councillor McPherson in terms of the process, to make sure that we do, respectfully hold management accountable, and we want to obviously do whatever we can to get a better financial result. Now, in wanting to do that, that does not mean that we are, in our cases, dishing Claudelands at all, but we obviously am aware that, there is a bottom line to it. So this, in my, with respect to the Deputy Mayor, and I agree with some of his observations, our role and our responsibility, as is the Parliament, Council, DHB, with varying success, is to ensure that we have we perform as a governance team proper scrutiny function. It just happens to be in public session, that is all. So I just want to stress that I think the questions are respectfully legitimate ones. Obviously, we've got to strive on the financial bottom line to do what we can to continue to try and improve that outcome. All of us, myself included, have got enormous pleasure from that facility. I mean, it's a real thing. You go to a daughter's graduation, it's at Claudelands. You're aware of the netball games. You go to the Disney thing. You know what I mean? There's tons of stuff, wonderful family stuff there. I agree with Dave, though. We want this to be not just a conference facility. Obviously, that's an important part of its market, but truly a facility for the community of Hamilton. Totally agree with the Deputy Mayor around regional facilities. That's a debate still to be had. Getting a proper regional mix for what is truly a regional facility, and I just wish you and your team well, Sean, to carry on the good work we're doing and trying to get a better financial outcome. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Okay, well, we have the recommendation, the motion that the report be received. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the key projects monitoring report for December 2015, and that's on page 74. Is there anyone to speak to that or take it as read?
We just take it as read.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, well, I'll put the recommendation that the report be received. Do I have a second?
Sorry, I did have a question. My apologies. Just in relation to the revised cost estimates, does the fact that they are the .12, first bullet point?
And this is in relation to Rototuna?
Yep.
We will be discussing that in a separate report.
Oh.
Further on, Rototuna is...
I'm particularly commenting on the financial aspect of it, not of the actual work.
But the details on the financials are in the Rototuna Reservoir report, which is item 40.
No, it's not in relation to that.
Okay, sorry.
The effect on rates, actually.
Okay, right.
And DC's development levies, I should say.
Okay.
I'm wanting to know if the fact that they're in our revised cost estimates has meant that we've miscalculated in some way on the development levies that ought to have been charged for development in that area, or in fact on rates as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yes,
thanks, Councillor.
In that area.
Okay, Chris or Blair?
My understanding is that'll be captured in the review of the DC schedule next year, so it'll be pulled in, and that would normalise that.
So it's not too late, in other words, to capture right from the start the cost of the updated costs.
So every year the DC charges are updated for actual development contributions revenue received in the previous year and any latest cost estimates or changes that may have occurred to the annual plan budget and also actual costs from the previous year. So it's an ongoing iterative process. So in the case of this particular project here, the levies for next year would reflect the latest costs for the project.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm a bit, I take that point, thanks. I was more particularly worried about whether we've had large amount of development in the area that ought to have had a bit of a higher DC because of if we'd done this costing revision earlier.
My answer to that is that there are swings and roundabouts. There'll be some projects that go over, some projects that go under. So yes, some developers who will have paid levies slightly lower for this project, but other projects they may have paid towards, we may have saved money against. So that's why we have a yearly review to try and keep up to that.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, so I've moved that the report be received. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Any discussion? Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Against? Carried. Victoria on the River, which is item 11 on page 79.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the report is reasonably self-explanatory, but effectively what we're seeking here is your approval for the Chief Executive to approve and award a contract to carry out the Stage 1 bulk earthworks on the VOTR site, and a slight tweaking of his delegated authority, the sum from 1.5 million to 1.65. I don't think for a moment we'll need that, but it's just a contingency in case we do, in order to make sure that the work can proceed with speed. So what's driving this here is splitting the original work program into two streams that are parallel in order to shorten up the overall construction period. The work will be tendered, obviously, in the usual way, full public open process. Full accordance with Council's policies and in accordance with the resolution to carry out the work in the first place, which I've noted there on item 16. The only fishhook in item 16, the resolution originally, was that staff report back to obtain approval, I'm sorry, that's clause E, to award the contract. We simply won't have time to do that in advance of the completion of this very short construction period that still remains just before the winter.
All right, I have a question. First question from Councillor Mallett.
Just a couple of questions. First of all, we talk about paragraph 5, the VTOR site represents a risk to both public safety and council-owned land. I remember, haven't you got your glasses?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry, I left them at home.
A million miles away from it. Okay, I'll just read it to you. The VOTR site represents a risk to public safety and council-owned land. When this came before council before Christmas, one of the issues that was raised by a few of us was literally concern over the safety of people walking underneath the site. I do recall, I think, a PR statement, or might have been a CEO's summary to us saying that signs were up and things like that. Those things have been done?
Yes, they have.
Okay. And is that still considered sufficient?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the second thing was just the timing of the work. I know it's been stinking hot, but we are getting close to winter. When will the work be done?
The work will be done. It's intended that the work should start very early in April.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a 6-week period, so it should be concluded 6 weeks thereafter.
Okay, so
middle of June.
Middle of May.
May.
Middle of May.
Yeah, May.
And okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions of staff on that report? All right. So there's a recommendation from management. Do I have someone who wishes to move that? Councillor Tuman. Seconder, your worship the Mayor. Any debate on the motion, which is item 10 on page 80? Councillor King.
I believe this is exactly what we should be doing. This is a piece of land in the city centre. We're enhancing it as a park for the public to use. This isn't reserve land. We could commercialise this to a degree if we wanted to without having the Reserves Act to work through. This won't dilute the city centre as the Ferrybank will, which will drag people away from the city centre and dilute the problem and dilute what's happening in the centre by dragging people down there. This will keep people in the city centre. I believe that we should even open this park up further to Victoria Street, so that there's a couple of commercial buildings there that should go to actually connect Victoria Street to the city centre. How it is, it's not open wide enough, and it's, I believe, a security risk once it's completed, because people can hide from the street around the corner the way it opens up in an H shape, and so that people can actually see from Victoria Street straight out and across the river. In saying that, I'd just like to remind councillors that it's a shame that we paid $3 million for a piece of property that I believe is probably only worth about $1 million. We got sold a lemon. It's got contaminated soil in it, and the completed job's going to cost us around about $10 million, and it shouldn't cost us that much. And we got emotional, saw a pretty piece of land that was overlooking the river, paid for it, paid far too much for it, and got caught with a huge clean-up job. So I just think it's a timely reminder that we shouldn't be in the property game. Because we don't know what we're doing. There's developers out there and the speculators out there who know what they're doing far, far better than what we do. Similar story to the Beggs Wiseman's building that we've just sold. We burnt money on it. After holding it for 20 years, we could have bought houses in Norton and tripled our money and not done a thing to them. So but the outcome in the end is going to be fantastic for the city centre. I believe this is the sort of thing that we need to be doing, of actually opening up the city centre to the river and connecting them up, not try and drag the city centre down into another area, expand the city centre and make it far bigger, diluting and making the problem that we've already got worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Any other speakers?
Chair, I just wanted to check, and so Nicholas will know, I am certain that this land was part of the whole Casino Perry redevelopment. It wasn't a piece of land the council went out and said, oh, I'll buy that. It was all connected up with that.
Yes, the original proposal was for a large building on that site that was part of the Perry's sort of development arm at the time, and that was contiguous and connected through to the casino.
Thank you.
Sorry, what are you saying?
I just wanted to get clarity that because my recollection was it wasn't like the council saw it and went out and bought it. It actually had some connection to do with the whole casino development. I was just checking that.
I understood we signed a sale and offer agreement to buy it for $2 million with another $1 million if we didn't develop it to their specifications by a certain date.
Yes, originally
it was a clean deal.
The Perrys couldn't get their casino and office development off the ground.
That's correct.
And I understand they approached the CEO of the time with a proposition which was to sell us the land.
And this council voted to buy it.
Well, the council of the day voted to buy
That's
it.
Right. Yeah. So it was a clean deal. It was a separate deal. It was offered us for $2 million.
Yes, they came to us with a proposal.
$1 million tacked on later because if we didn't develop in time. So it ended up costing us a penalty of another $1 million on top.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So are there any other speakers to this debate? All right. We'll put the motion. Sorry, I need to put the motion. I have somebody who moved. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that's right. Okay, so I have a motion from Councillor Tooman, seconded by Her Worship the Mayor. If there's no further discussion, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
No.
Councillor McPherson dissenting.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 12 is the Western Rail Trail, the physical works contract, and that's on page 83.
So through you, Mr Chair, the project development is going very well. We've set ourselves an optimistic target of completing the works this financial year. We're on target to do this, but critical to the timetable is to be able to award the contract in March, but the next Finance Committee meeting is not until sometime after that. So this report seeks CEO delegation to award one of the two main contracts, as set out in the report, which is likely to be just outside the CEO delegation. So the two, just to confirm, the two contracts will be competitively tendered on the open market, and it's just seeking a delegation once we've been through that process to award one of those contracts. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions of General Manager? There are none, so well, if somebody please put the motion on recommendation from Management 7 on page 83. The report be received and that financial delegation be given to the CEO. I have somebody to move. Thank you, Councillor Mallett. Councillor Wilson, did I hear you second? Thank you. Discussion on the motion?
No, it's just, again, I mean, this is rubber hitting the cycle trail.
Yep.
Good to see.
Okay.
All right, Hamilton Plan, cycle trail.
So no debate on
Connection.
Okay.
I'll just like withdraw.
So are you going to
I'm
debate?
backing ag- no, I was just going to say, no, I don't want to move that.
Oh, you don't want to move? No.
No,
Okay, well,
I misheard.
so we need someone to move.
Recycle advocate.
I do have a seconder, Councillor Wilson, but I need a mover first. Thank you, Councillor Toomey.
Sorry, I took
Chair,
the-
you can move motion.
Yes, I realise that.
Yeah, good.
Yes,
I just
realise
wondered if you
Apologies for
thought there
tipping
was-
Councillor Mallett off.
that. That's all right. So I have a motion on the floor from Councillor Toomey, seconded by Councillor Wilson. There appears to be no discussion or no debate on it, so those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. We've done right.
Councillor Mallett dissenting.
On your bike. Well, we've already dealt with Waiwhakariki, so we move now to
Now we do it again?
Rototuna, so stay in your chair. And we come to Rototuna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got Chris Barton with me, who's our project manager on this project. So this report seeks approval to award the final contract for the Rototuna Reservoir. So Council understands the importance of the project through previous reports, and I'm not going to dwell on that. This contract is related to the construction of the reservoir building and the associated pumping systems that go with it. Look, it's complicated. It's more than just a box building. It's a critical asset, and it's important that we have quality construction. So we've chosen our quality price trade-off model in contracting, and the result in front of you is comes from that market competition that attracted 7 tenders. So the recommendation in front of you is to award the contract to Hawkins Group, who provided the tender team with a great deal of confidence that they will build a quality product, which is really important to us. Just to note the finances, when Council awarded the second contract in October last year, they were advised that the overall budget had a risk of being exceeded by up to $4.5 million, that we could only quantify the final budget once this contract had been let and we had the market price for this contract. So this report indicates that the budget requirement is not 4.5, but it is still $2.5 million above the budget that's set aside. The majority of this, you will see from the report, is tied up in terms of contingency to cover unforeseen circumstances, but it is our experience that on a project of this nature that there will be a requirement to call on the contingency. So I think the recommendations are set out on page 109, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Chris? Or Chris?
Double Chris.
Councillor?
Just, it's more a question on the scope of the water supply that would come from this. Is this designed to also service areas outside Hamilton City Council boundary that we currently, for instance, supply? In that vicinity going north from our boundary?
No, look, the scope of this reservoir is part of the citywide system. So it's more than just a Rototuna, it's part of our citywide system, and it's been designed for Hamilton City Council and environs in Hamilton City Council.
Yeah.
It's not to say, I guess, that in the future it might form some part of a connected network if expansion was to happen.
Well, it has been said around this table before that we are not able to expand the supply that we give to Waikato District, for instance, in that northern area because of capacity issues and water pressure issues and things like that. I'm not a technician, so I don't understand the exact reasons, but is this going to improve our ability to supply in those areas, like where the general manager lives over the way over there? G'day.
Yeah, look, I've got Andrew in the audience, and he can correct me or add to it. But I think it would very much give us the capability to enter into those conversations if we needed to. So Andrew, have you got anything?
I guess my concern is that we might have, whether we've over-designed just for Hamilton's needs, in the anticipation that we'll have broader geographical needs than just Hamilton. And without the contribution from those areas to the capital cost.
Yeah. No, it's certainly not over-designed to take that into account. It's designed capacity-wise for our Hamilton City connected network.
The reservoir has not been designed for growth outside the city boundary. So we've got an existing supply agreement for the Waikato District, and that's just what it is. And it's a given, and our existing network supplies water into their network, but this reservoir isn't designed to service growth in the area of those existing connections beyond the provisions of the legal agreement that we've got with them. It's not to say this reservoir couldn't, but it's not been designed for that purpose. It's been designed for city needs and Tuna needs.
Sure, thanks.
Yes, Councillor.
Just have a question. I understand it's a critical asset and it will supply water to the Rototuna Hamilton North area. So before it's fully completed and operational, do you have any kind of other contingency plan? Because I think it's happened from the treatment plant, it's just pumped all the way up to the north, right? Through how many pump stations? Just in case a couple of those pumps malfunction. Would that, do you have any kind of contingency plan like a water tanker or anything? Would that happen? From now until because I noticed the water pressure is really, really low.
Yeah, look, I'll let Andrew answer this again, but I think that's part of what we've brought before council before, and the criticality of the timing of this. This is just-in-time infrastructure delivery. The city is growing, as we know, and we're going to hear as part of the annual plan coming up. It's growing faster than we anticipated.
Very fast.
So there is a real risk there in drops of level of service. So, like councillors, to be rest assured, even though it's really critical that we get this one built, we are working on a whole range of other matters of how we continue to keep the level of service going for the city, and particularly in that area. And there's a lot of planning, some physical works and looking at some connections, some staging of this project that will help, water demand management initiatives. So it's very much now focused to keep our level of service to the best possible level we can until this is operational in mid-2017. But it is a risk and it is a challenge.
So there is a risk.
Yeah.
No water. It might happen in the north.
Yeah. Andrew, anything to add?
I do not anticipate a scenario of no water in the north, just to be very clear about that. I think there's a potential for the level of service to be eroded or to be very low water pressure in some pockets. Yeah. I think that's the nature of just-in-time delivery of strategic infrastructure means you have very little resilience or headroom when you have a significant change in the growth profile. So, of course, in the north, we're seeing a lot more demand and development than forecast. So we're probably right on the edge. But there's a whole range of things that we're doing now, and also we'll be planning to do for next summer, because there'll be new developments online next summer to try and manage it.
Maybe 200-300 new houses, yeah.
But I can't just give you any absolute guarantees, that I can't forecast what will actually happen growth-wise. But there are a suite of interventions that we've got in place.
We can guarantee that we're very focused.
You will have plans to, contingency plan.
All right, thanks. Any further questions? Councillor King?
I noticed this summer we had several water alerts to slow us down on using water, usually, funnily enough, on thundery rainy days. Seriously, when they were announced, huge waterfall this summer, and yet we probably had got to a position of water alerts that would warrant a serious drought in past years. Is that? I also noticed that that was tied up with Waipa and Waikato and Hamilton all announcing at the same time. So I could only come to the conclusion that one of those other two councils had a serious, their infrastructure's seriously under capacity, and we ended up doing a comms deal with the three of us where we ended up not being able to water our gardens for it. I'm only putting this together from what I saw because it just seems very strange to have water alerts during quite a wet January. Is this reservoir going to overcome this issue?
So look, I'll start there and then you can jump in. But firstly, yes, we have a collaboration with Waikato and Waipa on water demand management and alert levels. Part of that is so we get a common understanding in our sub-region of what alert levels mean. We individually assess our own circumstances and our need to go from one level to two levels, but there is a lot of collaboration and a desire to move together if the circumstances are right. I think the reason that we went this time to alert level 2 alongside Waipa and Waikato were for our own reasons. Like we track very carefully the consumption of the city, and the consumption levels were very high, even though could seem a little bit surprising with the rain that we've had. The consumption levels have been tracking almost the same as last summer. So that when the consumptions are high in those peak times, it's putting pressure on our water plant and other assets, not just a reservoir. So I think we've moved, we moved to protect our ability to keep our levels of service going in collaboration with the two partners, but we're not moving because of their issues. They've got their own issues, and sometimes they're quite different than our issues. So Andrew, is anything?
No, that's a very good summary. So we move for our own reasons. We do look to move in collaboration. Our neighbours often have a number of different communities that are at different levels of water consumption, so they're balancing their own needs. It's entirely conceivable that they could move up or down out of step with us at any time. But we move for our own reasons. Our water alert system is very effective in terms of achieving the reductions in demand that we want. They're not a reduction on a particular day, they're sustained reductions. And so we're constantly tracking those going forward and reassessing. So we've got a dedicated team. We're well wired into a number of key stakeholders, and so we do weekly forecasting, sometimes daily. It's just coincidental and disappointing that it rains when we change, but we plan the change often 3 or 4 days out ahead of the change. But notwithstanding the rain, the community responds very well, and we're very pleased with the community response, and that's why we get through with the level of service across the whole city, particularly in Rotatuna.
So is there really a danger that we could run out of water if we hadn't called the alerts this summer?
No, the issue is one of pressure on infrastructure and our ability to treat. So we can treat very high volumes of water, but it becomes a challenge when you're doing that consistently every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, and there's no ability to undertake critical maintenance or flush gear. So when you're in a summer where there's a very, very high sustained demand, it's helpful to try and moderate that a bit with the water demand messaging. Plus we have regional council obligations and consent obligations to be sustainable in the use of our water in our community as well. But often it's just not helpful for our plant to be running at full noise for very sustained periods. It puts us in a very high-risk scenario.
Are we close to the cap on our resource management take that we're allowed to take? Are we at the ceiling?
No, we have a long-term allocation that has various steps in it, which again we track and check in very regularly on. We're doing very well in the city, and I don't see any risks for us going forward over the next 5 years, which is when the next step comes up. So we don't automatically get steps, we have to justify them. So we're tracking very well looking forward for the next 5 years with an appropriate amount of headroom to cover expected residential, industrial and commercial growth.
It's a part of being able to take a step in terms of our consent. Part of the requirements are we have to demonstrate responsible use of water, so water demand management and all of the things we do are really important when we go to regional council and we ask for that next step to be implemented.
Thank you.
Councillor McPherson, you have a question?
Yes, just in following that line of questioning, do you as managers think that had we put in domestic water supply requirements on all of the, I don't know, 5,000 or more houses that have been built in the Rototuna sort of greater area over the last 10, 12 years, that we might have delayed the need for increased infrastructure and reduced the pressure on the water supply, the water treatment station?
It's always desirable to have some form of water demand management provision in new buildings, and we've got a new district plan that sets out that framework through water demand measures. The short answer though is no, it wouldn't change the need for the reservoir in Rototuna, because when you start looking at prudent levels of storage as a city, as a single entity, it's always helpful to have a minimum level of service per head, a minimum level of storage per head of population to cover a 24-hour period where you have an unexpected event.
Isn't that based on a water supply system where 100% of the water supplied to households is treated, yet only something like 5% or less is actually needs to be treated in terms of it's fit for human consumption?
That's correct, yes.
And for instance, if every house had a grey water supply reuse system, then the draw off on treated water would be a whole lot less.
Absolutely. Yep, and other measures like low flow shower heads and a whole range of measures. The rainwater tanks is an interesting one, because at the time when we want water, it's normally in drought when the tanks are empty on properties, but it's more exactly what you said, Councillor. Grey water would be a big game shifter.
Yet Adelaide City, which is in a much drier area than Hamilton, has mandated for some years now that every new residential building and commercial building has rainwater tanks that are able to hold water for decent periods of time.
I'd strongly support the things you're outlining. They are in the new district plan. They probably more affect the treatment of water and then the timing of any investment in treatment capacity. Storage of treated water is another matter, and that starts to speak to resilience around the city, particularly for unforeseen events, which can range from anything from power outages to when reservoirs aren't available.
I just think we're getting a little bit off the topic here. If we can stick to the Rototuna Reservoir, and in the interest of time.
Just to be able to bring up water meters if you wanted to.
So I assume we've covered all the questions relating to Rototuna. I'm happy to move the recommendation from management. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Is there any debate on the motion? There is none. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Legal services contract, which is item 15 on page 113. And I just wish to announce that I have that Andrew King Councillor King has signalled a motion or amendment to a motion. So we'll have Richard presenting.
Twice in one meeting, I'm back at the front of the table.
It's not the front,
No, I
it's
haven't
the
done
back.
it to anyone else who's there.
I think it's at the front. Okay.
Sorry, and Councillor, Deputy Mayor Chesterman's conflict is noted for this, yeah.
I'm not going to say too much on this report. So effectively, what would have generally have happened is we would have gone out to the market to have entered into a tender process for our legal services. However, that's based on a resolution passed on 29th of November 2012 that where Council instructed us to go back to the market at the end of this contract to seek another exclusive provider. However, we've been having discussions within the region about other alternative mechanisms for procuring our legal services, and so I thought it was prudent to actually bring a report to Council just to provide some clarity about what those other mechanisms are and just reaffirm that resolution. So the report in front of you effectively does that, provides the options that have been discussed, as well as outlines our recommendation, which is to continue with the resolution that was put on the table on the 29th of November 2012.
Okay.
I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll move.
Well, I've got a question I'd like to ask, so we'll have the questions first, and I'm happy to have you moving the recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, so are there any questions before my question? Okay, well, my question is, and it's just something that I was looking at in the context of comparing an exclusive provider of legal services versus a panel. It's my understanding if we have an exclusive firm who exclusively provides the services, then by the Code of Ethics of the Law Society, that firm is generally precluded from taking any litigation against the council. Now, if we moved that from a single firm to a panel, and we had a number of firms in the panel, my question is, have we explored the issue as to whether all of those legal firms that are in the panel have got that same ethical issue around whether or not they could act for clients who wanted to get involved in litigation against the council?
Yes, or conflict.
Yep.
Can't.
Yeah, so there will have to be some mechanism for addressing conflict in this contract.
They'll all be in the same boat.
They'll all be in the same boat.
So it's fair to say it could be quite difficult to get a panel of competent, oh, no, I say not the word competent, but you could get a panel of solicitors who might stick their hands up to say, yes, we want to be part of the panel. Is that been something that's been perhaps tested in the market, given given the preference, particularly for the group of councils to go towards a panel?
Your statement's correct in terms of the conflict you've identified. In terms of testing it with the market, no, it hasn't. There is a number of uncertainties behind the scope of the legal services panel and how it will finally be put forward. I just wanted to get in front of council as early as I could to basically work out whether or not council is interested in that as an avenue, and I'm not recommending that, so that I could go into that discussion and try to work some of this stuff out. But at the moment, my recommendation is for an exclusive provider.
Yes, I see that, yeah, thank you. All right, are there any other questions? Councillor Wilson is moving the recommendation for management.
I am.
I asked for the motion to go.
Yeah, do you want yours to be an amendment, or you want?
No, it's a motion.
To be the motion, okay. I did signal that, sorry, Councillor Wilson, earlier on, that Councillor King has a motion, which you have the details of. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for Councillor King's motion?
I'm just trying to get my head around
Okay.
the recommendation. I've just got a quick question as a result of Councillor King's. The current, just remind me again, the current expenditure for legal advice?
Yeah, 1.5, huh?
Well,
1.58, is
that's correct.
Is that just under this contract? Because is that's Tompkins Wake, or that's everything we spend on lawyers? Because
It's on this contract.
Can I just also seek some clarification? I understand that in the current arrangement, we do use other legal firms. I'm thinking here of the Watertight, and there's another, we use another firm of specialist solicitors in another area too, don't we?
So the contract requires us to seek, to approach Tompkins Wake first to determine whether or not they can deliver those services. We already had an arrangement in place with another provider for leaky buildings. And during the rating review, we sought legal advice from another firm as well, because I'd provided previous advice during the previous rating review. So we just wanted it was more cost effective for them to just update that advice, and the contract allows us to do that.
So each time you do that, you need to go to, under the existing arrangement, you need to go to Tompkins Wake.
That's
the
right.
Existing providers to seek their clearance.
Yes, that's right.
I'm just trying to, wonder if Councillor King could explain what he's trying to achieve by B.
At times, the cost of a job may be over the $100,000 that Richard is allowed to approve at the moment. So with us going to multiple law companies if we want to, he needs to have the budget to be able to authorise a job without going back through the tender process, which I understand takes time and can be quite time consuming and there's a fair bit of work in the tender process. So by going away from one primary provider and giving them exclusive, Richard then needs more room to be able to authorise work without it going to tender. I've also said that in C, that the whole project needs to keep within the existing budget of, which is at that moment about 1.5 million, I understand. So what I'm saying is that we don't have an exclusive provider. In A, I'm saying we're not going to have an exclusive provider anymore. There are many law firms in this company, in the city and outside of the city, where we could go for advice. At the moment, we're going to one company. We would have a primary provider, but they wouldn't have the exclusive rights to pick and choose through what they want to take on first. So it gives Richard the flexibility
Understood.
to go elsewhere.
I've got a question, Mr Chair, to the Chief Executive, and that is for you, Mr Chair. From your experience, have we derived a better rate on the basis of the service being exclusive overall from your experience, or in fact, would that unlikely to affect the rate that legal providers would provide? I'm just trying to understand what's the benefit of offering an exclusive, and would you lose that benefit if you offered a primary?
With your permission, Councillor, I'd ask Blair to respond to that initially, because he was here when we entered into the exclusive arrangement, so he has a bit more history. If he can respond to that, and I can finish off the last part of that question, Councillor.
So the answer is yes, it did afford some benefit to council, and by way of favourable rates, both in terms of hourly rate compared to their standard rate, and also a discount beyond a certain amount of fees. It also enabled the particular organisation to invest in particular skilled staff on the knowledge that they would be able to have a certain level of work, reasonable assumption of a certain level of work that they could then invest in high quality skilled staff needed to provide the services for our type of work. So there was a sort of a benefit both in quality of staff but also in the rate that we received.
And do you think that would still be available on the basis that we would be saying to a successful legal firm, you're the primary provider, but we reserve the right to play around a bit?
Look, I think, I mean, it's a hard one to answer. I imagine it would introduce a level of risk, but ultimately that would be dictated by the responses. Certainly not having the exclusivity would be less attractive to some providers.
Just a follow-on question to that, would the issue I raised earlier around the ethical issues confronting the law firms would restrict a number of law firms from being part of the contract to delegate outside of the primary provider? And so there could well be, well, I'm asking, would there be some practical difficulties that approaching perhaps a second law firm in town to do a particular assignment for us might also raise the problem that maybe they couldn't act for us because they had acted against us, or it may prevent them from acting against us in future because of that fact that they had previously acted for the council?
The extent to which you described it, I can't add any more comment to that. So
I can certainly say that, sorry, that is a very good point, and that was something that was part of the arrangements put in place, that as an exclusive provider, that afforded Hamilton Council primary access to that law firm, and to the extent that they may have had a conflict, our needs always took preference, and they would then not act for any other party, or certainly not accept the opportunity to act for any other party where that party may, I guess, conflict their work with council. So that was certainly a very key consideration.
Right. Well, I'm happy to move an amendment.
Just one more question, if
Sorry.
I may,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman. Are we able to bring any more of legal advice in-house? Because some of the stuff which I see come where the lawyer comes in, I think, oh, we could deal with this ourselves, you know.
So just, I think, firstly, Councillor King's recommendation, motion he's put forward to C addresses that to a degree, but I want to talk a little bit about what I discussed with the Finance Committee with the feedback on the support services review. One of the changes I made during my restructuring was to have the democracy team provide oversight of our legal services contract, and that was an opportunity to actually ensure that we don't ask for the same advice twice, not that we do that, but just to validate the advice, compare advice, make sure it's consistent. There is some legal capacity in that team just to do some of that more basic advice as well. So we are looking to that. I think Councillor King's recommendation is a little bit more further up the scale, not necessarily full-on legal lawyer, but I think it's ramping that up slightly.
I like part C of Councillor King's motion, and I would like to move an amendment that I move the recommendation from management A, B, and C, and add Councillor King's C as D into the motion. That is that we appoint an exclusive provider of legal services. Yep. And that we look to undertake a public request for that proposal, and that and under D, the Chief Executive to resource an appropriate department with in-house capacity for the provision of legal coordination. I would see that C as being important in the sense of making sure that we don't have different staff members seeking similar advice from the same lawyers, maybe a month or two apart, when it's already been sought. So I see a kind of a filter process that would prevent, and it would also perhaps put a gate up to say, is this a legal issue, or is it something that the lawyers have already provided us with in terms of precedence anyway? So I'm looking for a seconder for my amendment.
So yours still keeps the exclusive provider thing, though, doesn't it?
It still keeps the exclusive
And the
provider.
goal is to somewhat reduce costs by managing that D should.
If it helps, I mean, if that's something, I'm going to foreshadow amendment, which is the staff recommendation. So if that one doesn't get, I'm going to move the staff recommendation.
Right. So I don't have a seconder anyway, so
So my amendment is a staff recommendation.
I'm happy to second that.
I wonder if I've got a question, have a question to Councillor King regarding his motion. If I can ask that question.
Yes, you may.
Okay. Councillor King, I quite
Can we
like...
go back to the motion, sorry, while you was talking?
I'm attracted to your motion. I'm just trying to get clarification. I'm a little concerned that C isn't clear enough. I think there is an opportunity for more than just a filter system, which is what C's implying, is actually to have a little bit of in-house capability. And I'm fearful that the Chief Executive may not put an LLB in that position, but somebody with some legal knowledge. Would you be prepared to strengthen C?
Yeah, but I want to be careful that we don't actually set up our own legal team in competition to legal companies out there. So I don't think that we should be giving legal advice. I think we should be giving guidance, direction. But I mean, what word are you suggesting? What change would you suggest making? I'm just. I imagine
vision of basic legal advice and coordination. I mean, there must be considerable amount of simple legal conveyancing or, you know.
Can I make a point here? There's the second of the motion. We've often had legal advice from the outside firm in relation to whether we need to do a bylaw or a simple policy change in that sort of area, which seemed, in fact, we had a classic case somewhere along those lines last year where a staff member who had that legal background pointed out the error of what we've been doing procedurally, if you remember, Chief Executive. And, you know, I think we could, there is some advice, in a legal sense, mightn't be the right word, but certainly guidance is important there. I think that's what C is trying to encapsulate.
Yeah, I understand what C's encapsulating. I'm a little bit concerned about bringing a lawyer, and what tends to happen and what I've observed in other organisations, they're not well resourced, they become
swamped.
Well, they become they become a jack of all trades and a master of none, and what you end up with is going out and basically having to validate their advice. So there's so many different pieces of legislation this organisation is responsible for. One of the reasons that we went for the exclusive aspect was we could basically go to that firm and get a variety of pieces of advice, from that firm, and not worry about them having to go off and school up on it. But if we have one person in house that's our primary person, even if it's defined as basic, they're going to have to be responsible for a broad range of legal expertise.
A dozen lawyers from that firm come in here to give us advice on different subject areas.
But that's their responsibility to go and research it. And there's multiple lawyers. One lawyer having multiple skill sets is a bigger push. And so I have some caution about that.
Councillor Mallett, you have a question?
Just going on from what Ewan was talking about, the C, are you after someone more like a practice manager in a law firm? And I'm not quite too sure what they do, but you're not talking specifically about someone who's got legal qualifications, but someone who understands how legal processes work and how work should be allocated? Or are you wanting someone who can, like Brendan does in a little way, well, he has helped us sometimes, on how delegations work, or what can be private and what can't be?
I envisage it would be a lawyer, as we've got several who already work for the organisation, but possibly not a practising lawyer, and they wouldn't come back with opinion, but they would, in writing, but they would do things like they would go through every opinion that came in, and when 3 months after we'd asked for opinion on one subject and the same question came back in, instead of going back to our provider and getting another bill for opinion again, they'd say, well, actually, here's a report here that lines up very closely with what you've asked. Will this suffice? And instead of us being charged for the same
Just to be clear, we do, for the most part, and I can't remember an instance when it hasn't happened, our legal services provider will tell us if we've asked for the same thing twice, for the most part. But it's just about coordinating it within the organisation and cutting out potentially some inefficiencies.
Right, have we covered off the questions
Yeah.
now? Okay, well, let's...
Can I continue with questioning?
You've got a question?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, would you agree that having more than one company that we could go to, either even outside of Hamilton or in Hamilton, would put some tension in the market, and where people would be likely, because there's a lot of work here, there's $1.5 million a year, plus there's a whole lot of other work on top of that for specific jobs, where you would have several companies running around trying to please us. I mean, the report here is basically saying that with the exclusive relationship, they run around after us, but would you say that having 2 or 3 companies who would, if we were offering them work, would be very keen to be competitive with their pricing, would be very keen to do the work?
I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not fully aware of the way they structure their pricing and so forth, apart from going through this process for working out our exclusive provider. I do know we get very good gold level service by having an exclusive provider. I do know that we have a robust procurement process for testing and getting the right market prices. It may well be, I can't give you an absolute answer, it may well be that we would introduce some competition into the market if we were to have options to go to different providers. And I think that's what you're trying to achieve through your B, is to give me the flexibility to have those discussions. I can't give you an absolute response because I'm not...
Are you comfortable to try this motion as the person who is in charge of this area?
Yeah, all I'm going to say is I put forward a recommendation for an exclusive provider because I wrote the report and I believe there's value in that. If this motion goes through, I can make this work as well.
But you weren't aware of this motion at the time you wrote your report, so
it was one of our options. So if you look at page 117, there was basically having a main provider, which I think is of legal services with a limited number of alternative suppliers. That is one option we considered. So we consider legal services exclusive, legal services panel, and a main provider with alternative providers. That's very similar, Councillor King, and we could make that work. It would work. I do believe we do have advantage in having one provider and having a main provider from a service point of view. Having alternatives as well may put pressure on the market, but I'm not an expert to be able to confirm that. But I can make that work.
Can the report saying that we have added value by having one provider?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you give me an example of some added value you've had over the since you've been?
Yeah. So some of the added values in.
And you've got a whole lot of words about free stuff that they give us, but nothing's free. We're paying these people $1.5 million a year plus other jobs on top.
It's a very good point. So it's additional training support. For example, I'm working with my new senior leadership team in terms of making sure they understand the Local Government Act and so forth. So part of that process will be some training courses held by the current incumbent at no charge, well, no additional charge. There's been provision of advice and so forth, broader than just legal advice in terms of the current provider understands our council business quite well, so discussing items that are outside the legal mandate but getting their views as trusted business partners as well. There's other training opportunities also they're provided. Yeah, so there's a suite of things in that sort of ilk. Yeah, and so last point, sorry, Blair was just whispering in my ear, priority access at short notice, and they also maintain a database of opinions as well, which we have access to as well. So they maintain their own database. Admittedly, of the opinions they've given us, we have access to that also. So
you really believe if they only got half the work, $750,000 a year plus other jobs on top, that service would drop off?
I think it would have an impact on the rate they negotiate, because I think the extent to which any organisation, I don't want to talk about them specifically, but the extent to which any organisation gears up for a large contract, they will incur certain overheads and so forth to provide service to that large contract. If it's less, then the level of support required to support that contract will be less, and therefore the services will reduce.
And you're comfortable that other legal firms in town get nothing for the next 3 years? They've been cut out of the whole process?
Like I mentioned, we're going to go through a robust procurement process for this, and so it might be any legal firm can go for that contract.
And you're not even allowed to go to another law company without going to these people and being told it's all right, you can go somewhere else first?
I don't know how I can answer that, to be honest. I mean, I can make your option work, is what I mentioned, that it can work. But I believe that having, for the reasons that have been discussed this afternoon, in terms of preference, having an exclusive arrangement.
And you're not saying that because it's just so easy for you, rather than it may not be, it may take a little while for a second firm to come up to speed, and with working with 2 or 3 companies, but do you?
Yeah, I mean, when we enter into these, we have on the books right now a resolution that we should go to the market and test our legal services providers. There's a resolution on our books that will potentially has the risk for us that we, and I use the word risk quite generally, but we will have another legal service provider, or could have another legal services provider that we have to bring up to speed, and that's just part of the course, and that's part of good procurement process, is that you do need to test these against the market every now and again. You need to test the pricing, and you need to make sure that you've got the best provider. And in doing that, sometimes you need to change. But when we build these processes, we'll make sure that we ensure whether it's the resolution you're putting forward or an alternative, or whether another provider gets the delivery of the services, we'll make sure there's a process in place for ensuring that we get up to speed as quick as we can.
We've spent nearly over 1.5 million per annum with this company. Are there extras on top of that? What other?
Do I pay extra above?
Yeah, are there extra jobs on top of that we give them?
I don't know how to respond for that. They provide our legal services. We've not contracted them to do anything other than legal services, and it's the legal services that we've reported regularly in the procurement report is reasonably transparent, I think.
So when something like the district plan comes up, that's not on top, that's included in the 1.5?
That's the total legal services budget. That's the total. Yep. Yep. That's right.
So if something like the inland port comes up where we need extra advice on that job, that's included in the 1.5 million?
You'll notice that over the last few years, our legal services bill has risen and dropped depending on where we are with some big, I'll use the word cases, but situations. And the district plan has been one where that has driven some other costs. There's been other complex activities. They were involved in providing us legal support through the pension housing. They provided some legal support through rates. There's a number of examples. We do our best to estimate our legal services budget, and we do our best to manage within that. And through my support services review, we place more focus on managing that. But for various reasons, and it may well be beyond our control, we may well exceed our legal services budget, but we try to balance up in other areas if we do that.
So largely the only thing I've changed from what your choice is to what my motion is all I'm saying is that you don't have to be exclusive to one company. You have the flexibility to use other companies, but you're not comfortable with that.
No, I said I can make that work, but my first preference is exclusivity.
Yep.
Where you don't have the choice to go elsewhere.
What's the difference between exclusivity?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's the reasons that Blair laid out before in terms of the advantages that we've experienced.
Thank you.
Right, now I have got some other questions. Councillor Gallagher, you had a question?
No, look, the exclusivity, that means that if there was a person some with individual expertise elsewhere in New Zealand or Australasia you couldn't pick that person up because it's exclusive.
Yeah, no, I think we've already
Yeah,
covered
I've
that
covered
off.
that.
Just to that point though, if I believe that person has more expertise than our provider, then I will be challenging them and looking to use that person with the greatest set of skills. And the example of that was the previous advice received through, for the rating review, the lawyer we used in that case is nationally recognised for his rating skills. So there was no question about that. We used that person because they're nationally recognised. They're the top lawyer in the country for rating issues, so I went to that person.
So that's an individual.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, I'm trying to define, I apologise, slow on the uptake today, but the word exclusive.
Yep.
The word exclusive to me is that you go back to your provider and...
Yep, and that was the first port of call, and I told them what we were doing, and we agreed that was the best approach for council.
The provider had to agree?
Yes.
If the provider hadn't agreed, then you couldn't have done it?
It was never a case they're going to disagree.
No, but
yep.
I'm saying
yep.
hypothetically.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Just the other thing is in terms of price, I get the bit about, critical mass, 24-hour call service for 1.5 million, I'd hope for that. The issue of, a price, a deal price-wise, because obviously if someone's got an exclusive contract, I guess that they will then offer you a much better financial deal, or not? Is that not?
Yeah, and absolutely, that was one of the reasons I was put forward to enter into an exclusive arrangement.
Hmm.
Councillor Wilson, you had a question.
Yeah, very quickly. Could you remind me so far how long Tompkins Wake have been our current legal providers? Because my understanding was that some time ago, council resolved to extend it one more time, and the council at the time recommended that it wouldn't be extended again, it should go out to public consultation. But in fact, we did.
That's right. So
they had quite a few years.
Paragraph 14 refers to that, Councillor Wilson. So basically, as I mentioned before, on the 29th of November 2012, Council made a resolution that at the end of this renewal, we would go to the market. And that's what we intend to do.
Thank you for pointing that out. I had actually read point 14, but it didn't answer my question. My question is, how long had they been prior to that extension?
The contract was originally put in place in 2006.
That's what I thought.
With Strawberry Dixon.
And they had a name change, they amalgamated, but it was the same entity, basically. So 2006 to 2012, and then they got another bite of the cherry.
Just to be clear, were they the same entity?
They weren't.
No.
Well, they
One board, another
amalgamated.
Yeah, they took them over,
They
the
took them
Hamilton office over, didn't they?
And in fact, my understanding was part of the takeover was an undertaking that the new entity would continue to have the City Council's business.
Is that, I don't know, is that what you...
I'm not aware of that, Councillor.
But it is fair to say that from 2006 to now, it has either been the original Shawbrook and Dixon or Tompkins Wake.
That's correct, Councillor.
And it had been our normal policy to have reviewed this much earlier.
The original contract was entered into to go to 2009 and was extended from there.
To 2012. And am I right in recalling that at that stage...
Sorry, Councillor,
Yeah.
it had a right to renewal.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
they took it through 2012.
Okay, so they've had it for a very long time. My final question, if I could. In light of the fact that they've had it now for a number of years, has that made them... Have we in fact positioned them now to be the major player for the very reason you've articulated? Because one of the points you've pointed out has been, look, we wanted to provide an exclusive relationship so that the legal firm could go off and build this very capable team with a very broad expertise in the types of legislation they would have to give advice to, and the very resources that we rely on, to the point where they now have a distinct advantage over any legal firm in the City of Hamilton.
I'm not too sure how to respond to that.
It's called cornering the market.
I don't know how I can respond to that. Ultimately, I'm not sure about the other sides of other legal firms in Hamilton, Councillor.
I guess I've just been in this chamber for long enough to remember how this has evolved. And I remember some very strong expressions being made at the time that, gosh, when are we going to let the open market have a crack at the opportunity? And somehow it kept being renewed. And now, of course, one of the points you've articulated so clearly is the importance of the breadth of expertise and of course I can't help but think we've over the years funded it, and now clearly they've got a distinct advantage. But thank you.
All right, so we've completed questions now. Let's go to, we have an amendment. If we could perhaps pop the amendment up, and then we also have a motion. So we now move into the debate.
Rob, can I ask a question of Andrew, if he just to tidy up his motion? It should be go to the market for a primary but not exclusive provider, and allow the chief executive, comma, within his delegations, close comma.
Yeah, yes.
If you don't mind, sorry.
Is that acceptable to Councillor King and Councillor McPherson?
You guys
happy with that? It's all good. Yep, it's all good. They're nodding.
You see?
A primary but not exclusive.
Yeah, you're a heck of a winker. Right, winker.
Your Worship, would you like these motions to be considered together, or would you prefer?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's
I'm
do
happy
that.
to talk.
Okay, so let's go into debate on this.
I'm happy to go.
Yep.
I
So
think
isn't it normally the mover?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, of course. Yep.
Sorry, no, I was just, he's looking at me, so.
Councillor
you know.
King?
Yeah.
I just feel like there is no tension in the market. I feel like we are a big customer, and all of that work's going one way, and there isn't even the choice for us to feed that work elsewhere through our CE. I believe that by letting other people, giving us the choice to go to other people instead of having one provider, will put some tension in the market. And I think competition's good. I think competition's healthy. And at the moment, I don't believe there is any competition. I believe that some of the smaller companies will run after us. They will run around. They will come up here. If we made a phone call now to one of the smaller companies or to a secondary provider, they'd be up here like a shot, because they would know that we would be a big client for them, even if we were only giving them $200,000 a year. So I believe that things that have been presented, the weaknesses that we've been presented here with changing, I believe that the argument is actually should be in reverse. Competition brings efficiencies, and as soon as you protect the market, you end up with inefficiencies because people get complacent. I think it's time to try something else. It's been a long time. And this could have been looked at in 2012, and it wasn't, because that's when the contract finished.
Anyone else wish to speak? Your Worship?
I think we've lost sight of what this is about. This is about a procurement process, and in fact the competition is the procurement process. And that's why I am supportive of going out as the staff have recommended, and not, I think, which is a good part of the report, this panel approach that LES are putting forward. So from my perspective, testing the market and testing the tension in the market and the competition is the procurement process. Secondly, the thing I want out of legal services is accurate, correct legal advice at an appropriate cost. Of course I know a little bit about this. I can't help but, can I? And I also know that in order to get that, you have to have the right sort of people who have that skills in that firm. Local government is a specialist area. That's the reality of it. It is. And while it would be great to think that there's lots of firms who can provide that, I'm fairly confident that there won't be a lot locally. Sure, they'll be able to do pockets, but I think we're looking for a comprehensive service here. But the procurement process will sift that out, and that's a good thing, because it should be open for everyone to put up their case and say what they can do for us.
Yes, that's all. Yep, okay.
I'm carrying on, sorry. I
Yes,
thought there
yes,
was a
please.
distraction going on. So they can come and test it through the procurement process. At the end of the day, I think a legal relationship, whomever might be appointed, is a very important relationship for this council, and I want to make sure that we have a provider who can provide a level of service at an appropriate cost that is accurate and timely, and I don't think you get that if you have a panel. The other thing is, I think the waters are being muddied here a little bit about how much have we spent already and how do we filter it. And I do agree with the Chief Executive when he talked about this in his corporate services review, that historically it's been quite easy for anyone to run off and go to the lawyer. And I don't agree with that. And I'm pleased to hear that he is going to put someone in place who can filter that, because I think that is absolutely critical. I do not support an in-house lawyer, whether that is providing a little bit of advice or a lot of advice. And the reason I don't is not because they won't be lovely people and great to have on the team, it's because to maintain your level of skills, you need to be exposed to the daily rigour of that and the people around you who have a higher level of expertise in cases that test you. And the reality is you don't get that in an in-house lawyer environment unless you're, you know, got a big legal team in one of those big corporates, and that's the reality of it. So I think what the Chief Executive is proposing about the filter and managing that better, I like that. I want to test the proposition and test the tension in the market and test who's out there, and that's the procurement process. And I do support having a very close relationship with a legal advisor in a professional sense, because I want them to know our business so that they can provide the legal advice to the standard that we require.
Councillor McPherson.
Okay, thanks. I actually think the water has been muddied a little bit by the Mayor with the last speech. The real issue here is whether we go for exclusivity or not. There's nuances around the in-house advice or support or whatever, but I don't think there's any real difference there, so I'd discard that side of the issue and just to talk about the exclusivity. I think another issue that has not been raised much yet is the public perception and the perception within the legal industry of the nature of the in-house agreement. I think Councillor, some of the comments from the public, which were Councillor Wilson's questions, were brought out that effectively our legal advisors over the last 10, well, a lot further years actually, because whatever they were called beforehand, it would have been our lawyers for quite a while before that as well, mostly, that they've cornered the market, and there's a perception out there in the legal industry that they've cornered the market in legal advice to counsel, and it's it could be quite a learning curve for a new firm to get into that. And I think at the point of putting out expressions of interest, calling for tenders, it's going to be very difficult for another firm to compete with our current solicitors, because they have cornered the market in Hamilton. Though when the Mayor says it's a very specialist area, local government, I'm mindful of the fact that the acknowledged specialists in local government in New Zealand aren't actually our legal firm, it's Simpson Grierson's Wellington office. But we're not able to go to them for advice, and that's specifically come up a couple of times because they're not actually, contracted to us. When it would have been useful for us, some of us felt at the time, to get that sort of advice from them. So I think the best position for us to be in is to have not a panel as such, but have a number of people in the legal fraternity with areas of specialty that the CEO can call on as needs be. And it may be that, especially to start with, we go to our previous solicitors for a lot of that, contracted solicitors for a lot of that advice. I wouldn't have a problem with that if they are at that point in time the best in that field. We'll develop contacts that are wider than just one company, and we'll have the flexibility to use them if, in the judgment of the CEO, they're needed. At the moment, we can't, unless, as was pointed out, I think by Councillor Gallagher, unless they give permission. So I think that the ball was on the wrong, the shoe is on the wrong foot in that situation. I think we should be able to decide to go somewhere else should we feel the need. And with the current situation, the proposal and the amendment, we're not able to go where we feel the need is. I think we need to have that flexibility. It does not mean that we're going to not use the current solicitors. It does not mean that at all. But it does mean we have the ability to, if we think the need's there. And so I support the motion.
So, Chair, can I just, sorry, interrupt? I have to go. I was supposed to be at an event at 6 o'clock. I know that's a bad sign moving out at this time, but actually I do have to go, because I've got to make a speech. So I actually have to go. I'm sorry about that.
Right, thank you.
It's a bit weird, isn't it? But there you go.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, thank you. I certainly acknowledge Her Worship's obvious legal background, and that's very, very helpful. I also acknowledge, with respect, my role as a legislator for 12 years, and with some idea, particularly in the Wellington parliamentary government sense. And my view is I always have a degree of caution when it comes to the use of exclusive, because that actually, another name for exclusive is monopoly. And I obviously want to first of all thank the CEO for what I think is a good report in terms of you've expressed your preference, sir, but you've then given us some options, and the grid table I think is a really good plain English summary. I think there's two aspects which in my view are quite critical. I think para 22 is critical, and you do get a bouquet from me, because as part of your restructure, responsibility for legal services was shifted to democracy, which has a number of qualified lawyers on staff. And this is the next key thing, and let me acknowledge the quality of that staff, obviously. But this provides an opportunity to leverage this expertise to better manage the contract by putting in place improved processes around contract oversight of legal services. This should in turn deliver better value for money from the legal services spent. If we go to item C, I think to a degree, obviously what the King motion is doing is still giving you total chief executive manager oversights of how you if you like, use and allocate those resources, all right? And I think that's been a really constructive bit of the restructure of that quality, and we certainly noticed that at the elected wing. The other aspect that you talk about in the grid, and it's a really interesting thing, where you talk about in the top option, the exclusive option, the current legal services arrangement allows for an hourly rate discount. In addition, there is a rebate paid on legal services spent. Under the other contract delivery models, you may not get the same levels of discount or rebate. If I'm a partner in a major or minor legal company, $1.5 million worth of business is something I would care for a lot. And I still am inclined to think, and I hope I'm not being naive, that even though it's not an exclusive, but it's a primary contract, that is still going to be of huge interest to me, as a company provider, because there's a significant revenue stream that's on tap there. So obviously, in order to keep that revenue stream going, I've got a great interest in having a team of capable people and being cost competitive. I also know that if, as the primary company provider, our eye went off the ball in terms of any particular qualitative advice, number one, my client has got other options to go out and look at someone else for a specific area. And I certainly don't like the idea of having to go to my primary provider and ask basically for permission for me, if I've talked to the democracy team or whoever, you know, the relevant expertise. If the CEO determines through a range of advice that there's actually a degree of specialist expertise as resident in Dunedin or Christchurch, you know, hypothetically, I like the idea of a CEO having the option to say, well, actually, do you know what? As a courtesy, I'll say to my primary provider what I'm doing, but there's no degree of negotiation or understanding. I'm going to go off to Christchurch in that specific instance. I don't personally think having a primary provider will necessarily be massively different to an exclusive provider, but when you do not have a monopoly, a degree of a competition or threat of competition, I think is probably a healthier process.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I followed this matter with interest over the last 15 years that I've been in local government, because I felt and have expressed on numerous occasions my concern at the exclusivity of the legal advice that had been in play, and the fact that it had, on at least 2 occasions that I can recall, we had debated whether we would go to the open market, and for whatever reason council chose not to, and I felt that was unfortunate. I don't put much value on the words of Her Worship in terms of the advice she's given us on this matter, because I think, in fact, we can derive all the benefits that she's expressed by having a primary relationship with a legal firm as opposed to an exclusive one, and retain the independence that that would enable us to have. I'm not convinced, and I talked to a lot of other councillors over the years, I'm not quite sure of many councils in New Zealand that have an exclusive relationship with their legal advisors. My understanding, most have access to multiple advisors. And I think I've got that on pretty good authority. So I think we've been bucking the trend here in Hamilton, and I don't know if we've necessarily been setting the best practice. This other suggestion that that only the larger firms have the in-house resources and the capabilities. Look, I have a feeling the legal fraternity, and in fact the Law Society, probably has some pretty clear guidelines. And I'd imagine Councillor Pascoe would know more than I, because he sits on some of the ethical reviews. But I would imagine there is in fact a requirement of legal firms to give a certain standard of responsiveness to their clients. So I am very comfortable with the fact that if we didn't go with the largest in town or those that have done it before, that we wouldn't actually get very, very good legal service. And again, what I like about the Councillor King and McPherson motion is it gives us that flexibility. We can go out, we can test the market, we can empower some of the smaller firms to come forward with innovative proposals, and ultimately we reserve the right to go elsewhere, where currently the status quo requires us to ask permission. And although I accept the CEO's word that that permission is never not granted, I would prefer to have that as our right, not theirs. So I think the amendment is a continuation of bad practice. I think the motion is the way to go, and I think a lot of legal firms will sigh and think, finally, actually Hamilton isn't a monopoly or a closed shop. Maybe we've finally found the open market and we can compete with the larger firm. And I think that's got to be good for us and ultimately the people who fund us, which is the ratepayer.
Just a procedural point, Mr Chair, sorry. The mover of the motion is no longer present. I understand you need another...
The mover of the amendment?
Of the amendment, my apologies here.
Yeah.
You need to either get someone else or it lapses.
No, once a motion is moved and seconded, it actually belongs to the meeting then.
What if we don't want it to belong?
Well, I'm sorry, councillor.
Play nice, councillor.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you for your ruling on that. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Maybe just as a point of clarification, when I look at the Mayor's amendment, I understand that we will go out to the market and I'll put a tender process in, and whoever comes in with the best tender and they can meet the job and that sort of stuff gets the job. Richard is the person who's running this. He's put in for his recommendation is basically that one up there. And he's given us his preference today. And here we are trying to tell him what's the best bit for him to run with. And yeah, so I'll be definitely supporting that amendment.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak?
Just one change. There's a word missing. On C, Chief Executive to Resource and Appropriate Department. There should be just Nan in there if everyone's happy.
Was that there before or was it not there before?
No, just the word and.
It's okay, so it's now in there?
Yeah, it's in now.
I can't support that, Andrew.
Okay, so Councillor McPherson, you're happy with that change?
I didn't even notice it.
Okay, all right. Well, I wish to speak in support of the amendment. I think for the reasons that Councillor Tooman has outlined, we will achieve some degree of competition by going to the market. From my many years in business and being in successful businesses over many years, we are not your standard average run-of-the-mill business. This is a highly specialised business operating in a very, very public environment. So we need to have specialist support, particularly in the legal area. I think the concept of exclusivity is rather an illusion, because my understanding and my work in both the in professional ethics is that professionals require levels of competence before they accept work. And for the same reason that whoever our exclusive provider might be, they may well have to step aside because they are not in a position to provide the skills and the competency in the particular area of work that we have with them. And I think that may well be a case with the Watertight Homes one, where we had a specialised firm that would have run with this in a much more efficient way than our provider. And for the reasons that I outlined earlier, I think we might struggle to find other legal firms who might want to undertake our work on the basis that they may then subsequently be precluded from being involved in litigation against the council. So I think for the reasons that Councillor Tooman has outlined, we have a recommendation here from our CEO. Obviously at the CEO and staff level, they are the people who work in this environment with our legal advisors, and they are best suited to give us some recommendations as to where they think this work should go. Okay, so there are no further speakers.
Excuse me. Could I just ask the CEO a question?
Yes, you may.
When did we last tender this contract?
2006.
10 years ago.
Just confirm that, it was 2006. Yes, it was 2006, councillor.
So it's been 10 years
10 years,
since we
that's
went
correct.
to the market.
That's correct.
Is that acceptable?
some.
I think Councillor
10 years
Wilson
since
effectively asked
anyone
that.
else has had a chance to.
We opposed it. Some of it, just in the previous, I think it was the previous council, some of us did oppose the rollover. No disrespect to the current provider. We just didn't feel the process.
Yeah, so that's why on the books there is.
But hang on, guys, this is the history. We're now moving forward, aren't we? And we are resolving, we're resolving the problem that Councillor Wilson has alluded to earlier on about it being in one firm's pocket for that period of time. Okay?
That's right.
Okay, so we're ready to vote.
Right of reply.
Pardon?
Right of reply.
Oh, sorry, Councillor King.
I just want to put a couple of things that have been said right. This motion does not suggest that we have an in-house lawyer. It's somebody to coordinate, guide and direct. Okay? That's not that may be a qualified lawyer, but this isn't about legal advice. All right? And the other thing I want to clarify is that it was suggested that we would have a panel. The option 3 is the panel under having a panel of legal services. This is not about having a panel. So I think that's just muddying the waters, introducing these things that actually aren't part of this motion, or they're not part of the amendment either. We are still going to have a primary provider. The only difference is, the only thing we're saying here is it's not exclusive. I'm struggling with where the fear that's been introduced or the doubt that's been introduced, I'm struggling why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Okay, so we go first to vote for the amendment. And I would ask that those who wish to vote in favour of the amendment, please raise their hands.
Councillors Tooman, Young and Mr Chairman.
Those against the amendment?
Councillors Wilson, McPherson, King, Gallagher and Mallet.
The amendment is lost. So we now move to the motion. Can you just roll that down a little bit, please? And so I ask those who are in favour of the motion to raise their hands.
Councillors Wilson, McPherson, King, Gallagher, Mr Chairman and Councillor Mallet.
Those against?
Councillors Young and Tooman.
The motion is carried.
Motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, item 16 is the Southern Links investigation on 119. This is a closeout completion report. Do I have?
I'll move.
Oh, okay.
I'm just signaling I need to leave at 6:30.
Business as usual, personally.
All right, so we take the report as read. Councillor Wilson has moved. I assume on the basis that there are no questions to the closeout report. Councillor Tooman has seconded.
Yep.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just
yes,
one question.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Why is the
Question,
print so
question,
small?
Councillor.
Every time this has come up, staff have been asked about this, and every time they've been asked about it, they've promised to put it on a list for discussion. And every time we come back the next time, it's not there, because I don't think it's not a road, so they're not particularly worried about that. Where is the proposal for rail, for the protection of some land for a future rail link from the north-south main trunk line to the airport? Where's the reference?
Good point.
I know you're road builders, but this case we'd like to play with trains.
Look, like I'm reaching back into a little bit of history because the project's been going on for so long, but I do recall it came to the council on a number of occasions and it got turned into that rail options were to be consideration and nothing that got designated excluded rail. So I think in the scheme assessments rail was discussed, but this transport corridor designation, as opposed to road designation, doesn't preclude the opportunity to put lanes rail in. So there was some discussion about it in the various reports, but it's been through council.
I'm sorry, but Councillor Blind Freddie can see that you can't run a rail line up around a roundabout north of the airport and then back down to the airport. That doesn't geographically, physically work.
Councillor, I can't recall the exact detail, but it has been discussed over the 4 years of running this and
where's the evidence of that, Chris? Where's the evidence?
It will be in some of the previous reports of council. Look, I haven't focused on that because this is the project closeout report,
sorry.
which the council is designated and
know.
it's complete.
Well, it's the project closeout, and it's missing the point that I have, and others have raised every single time. It's not, look, hey, if the rest of the meeting doesn't want it, and yeah, that's fine, that's democracy, not to even raise it. You know, it just shows that,
Dave, just to your point, is that was that a resolution that?
No, it was a request that couched almost the same way, and plenty of councillors have heard it before, that that be considered by the working groups, or whichever, which include NZTA and other councils, regional council and so forth, that be considered, and they come back to us saying something about it, so that we could say yes or no or whatever.
So it was uneconomic, or couldn't be done, or it can be done, and here it is.
Or
but there's no, sorry, and no disrespect, but there's not a council resolution behind that request.
No,
that's
nor
just
is there a council resolution
Yep.
that we should follow these particular routes of the road.
No.
We just said you need to provide transport corridors to the airport, in that whole southern area, including around the airport.
Okay, thank you.
So, you know, I don't have a problem with these, it's just, it's missing that aspect, and it's been said before that it's very hard to retrofit railway lines. So yes, so we're saying, look, 30 to 50 years out, when you just make sure that you don't build yourself out of something you may be economically viable in future. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm coming from.
So look, we are going back to the history of the project, and I recall it. It did come to council, and there was a discussion about, is it our role to designate and pick up the land obligation for designating rail corridors? That turned into making sure that this designation didn't preclude the functioning of rail. But we're not the road, we're the road controlling authority for rail, for road corridors, but not rail corridors. So,
well, we've got something else coming up. We've had just earlier about a rail corridor, didn't we? and your department was. I mean, we know that we are not legally the controlling authority for rail, and I recall that discussion you're talking about, and one of the things that was said then, why aren't you having a discussion with New Zealand Rail or the rail corridor providers? What do they call them? Is that who they call them? I can't remember whether there's a distinction between the provider and the operator sort of thing.
New Zealand Rail Corporation.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and they might say, okay, we'll, you know, there's sufficient, even a comment saying there's sufficient scope in here, the designations around don't preclude it. You know, where is the answer to that question?
Is there an opportunity for this to be done at this particular point, for that to be done at this particular point? With the other,
No,
you'd presumably have to reactivate the other parties, wouldn't you?
You'd have to reactivate that. I'm just quickly looking at. So it is covered if you go to page 182 of 193, which is we're looking at the objectives of the corridor, and you can see that on the second to last line on the table, where it's got provide opportunities for passenger transport and
Where's this? So you must have a different page from the one that. Hang on, Chris. I got that's not on my page 82.
So if you go to
182.
182.
Attachment 4.
Yep.
So,
electronic ones are different from paper ones quite often. So just trying to explain it.
It's the last page on attachment 4.
It's on the last page on attachment 4. So
Which
the very
square?
last page on the report.
Reading the fine print, which square?
So if you come up the second row, second to last objective there. So the signed off objective, provide opportunities for passenger transport and alternative transport modes which will not preclude the potential development of rail transport in the long term. So they were the objectives that were signed off by council. So what this report is doing is saying how we have met those objectives. So that was a signed-off objective of council from memory. And it was after the discussion about whether it was our business to designate rail corridors, and rail was seen as really important, but it was to give consideration and make sure we didn't designate anything that would make it hard for rail in the future, difficult for rail in the future.
Have you found it, councillor?
Sorry?
You found it?
I found what he's talking about, yeah. Thanks.
Does that answer your query?
No, he's quite correct with the part on the left, but there's no evidence that that in the actual report itself. That's the brief, it seems to me.
From memory, we came to council for agreement on the objectives. So, Mr. Chair,
There's nothing wrong with the objectives. It's the designation.
I guess it's a matter of whether it was considered or not, if it was part of it.
Look, there's been a history of coming back to council. I would have to, if you wanted me, I could go back and trace that issue and provide an email.
Do you require that, councillor?
No, that would be helpful, and perhaps it could have attached the records of the discussions with the New Zealand Rail Corporation and so forth, because they would obviously couldn't do this without discussion with them.
So, Mr. Chair, we could do that. It's a lot of work probably to go back and do that.
To be
how important?
Yes, it's important.
Oh, it's not important at all. It's just it's only been raised for about 12 years. It's not important.
Well,
I mean, I think that comment by the manager is inappropriate. If the council doesn't want it, that's fine. If a councillor requests it and the meeting is okay with that, then it shouldn't be said it's a lot of work and we can't, that wasn't the question they were asked. They were asked whether they could do it. I mean, it's not as if it's being raised out of the blue, this issue.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor,
I'm not sure. Certainly in the annual plan process and discussion I've had with Richard Briggs, there's a couple of other rail type issues that I've raised, not to do with this.
Yep.
And in the end, it's actually, I get the feeling what Councillor McPherson's alluded, and I've heard him go on and on over 12 years actually in different roles. And we talk about it and we think it's there, but it's like that, that insurance ad, you're only getting half the pyramid, you don't get the whole pyramid, and the guy, and I've got a feeling that Councillor McPherson's in that role if you saw the ad years ago. I would just like somewhere in the appropriate body a proper discussion with a yes or no, test the numbers as to whether this council maintains a strong aspiration to have the airport precinct future-proofed in terms of being crystal clear that we want to see an appropriate link from the main trunk line across to the airport in terms of a space of land. And the example is, years ago I was on the Hamilton arterial roading study and we talked about W2, and I've spent so much energy talking about W2, but in the end all it was a dotted line on the map. Across W2 is beautiful big houses now, which cost you a heap if you ever do want to put a road through on W2. And what I'm saying is we talk about stuff and we go round the mulberry bush with respect. I just want to know, you see what I mean? So all I want, I think it's in there, in the fine print. I'd like to bring it up into the big print and just run the numbers at the appropriate time about whether that's still an ongoing council aspiration in terms of Hamilton plan, arterial study, Southern Links, all of that, okay? So it's really, I guess, about process that Councillor McPherson's going on about. Don't have to make a decision here now, it's just actually having the proper discussion on the table and reinforcing the fine print that that's still our major policy objective, okay? Because the problem you have is I don't know, until you actually do a bit of a designation or line on the map, the house can be built across it. Does that make?
I'm looking for some resolution here.
Well,
is it?
We would, through you, Mr. Chair, we're happy to provide an email update to councillors that just reflected on the rail discussions through this project.
Okay. Is that satisfactory, Councillor McPherson?
And I think that will trigger a formal item being put on an agenda.
Okay. Well, let's see what
staff, then by councillors.
Okay. Well, let's see what comes through, shall we? Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm happy with that, I just want, and this is a, you know, I get a bit frustrated with our process. I just hope we can have a situation where we don't have to get 6 signatures to requisition an item. You know, I hope we have sufficient goodwill. Vote it down by all means, but at least we get it up on the table if 2 or 3 councillors would like that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we do have the recommendation from management, and I think somebody moved that. Councillor.
And I will move an amendment that it be noted that the GM will update councillors with reference to questions as rail, you know, as per the item, which we can say is on page, you know, yeah, as per. Yeah.
Are you happy with that to go into your?
No, I'm not, Mr Chairman.
You are?
I'm not. No.
You're not. Okay. Well, we have a seconder for your motion, for Councillor Tooman's motion.
Right. Do I move an amendment? All it is, I just want it noted in the minutes somewhere that we've had this discussion and there's an action going to be taken. And I'm happy for it to be a minute note.
Move a motion.
Okay, I'll move a motion. That.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, would it be better to put on the action list, onto the action list, so that
well, we have descriptive minutes, and as long as the descriptive minutes record the addition to the action list, then that will do it, won't it?
Are you happy with that?
It will be recorded on the action list.
Yeah.
And it will be there and tracked.
In the spirit of goodwill to Councillor Tooman.
Okay, so Councillor Tooman's motion.
And suddenly the sun started shining.
As long as these guys are happy.
Suddenly the sun started shining.
With where we're going.
All right, so we'll put that on the action list, and we will move. Councillor Tooman, Councillor King has seconded the recommendation from management on item 9 on page 120. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yep.
Yes, Councillor King.
I just think it's fantastic that we've got this far. It's been 30 years since we promised the people of Peacocks that we'd open up to them, and developers everywhere else around the city have jumped the gun and got in front of Peacocks, and we've been told by staff in the past that it's because there's a whole lot of small players in Peacocks and it's a lot easier to deal with the big boys. And I just think it's fantastic that this is actually a big step to get the designation through, and and a lot of work, and I think it's fantastic that it's in place. But it also, the part of our ring road that isn't complete and isn't funded is the Southern Links, and this will all go hand in hand with Southern Links when it happens, and it will happen quite quickly when it happens. Once everything's designated, the government may quite quickly make the money available depending on the timing, and that will put the pressure on us then to really get going. So I just think it's good that we've got this far after 30 years of promises where we've actually done something. So there's a lot more to go, but it's a good start.
Thanks, Councillor.
One sentence only, the time moves on. I just want to endorse the comments of Councillor King, and notwithstanding my passion around rail, to acknowledge the progress to date, and that will, I believe, in future have certain boundary issue implications for where the city may grow beyond the current Peacock's growth cell in the future, but that's another debate.
90 words.
Done.
Okay, all right.
You said one word.
And I'd just like to endorse what Martin said.
Any other speakers? Right, we'll go.
Can I move an extension for Gary?
Yeah, extension.
Okay, let's go to the vote.
So funny tonight.
Those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 17 is the easement for Vector Limited.
I'll move.
Take the report as read. Okay.
Sorry, another question. So am I reading this report right that they just went ahead and built it thoroughly without
illegal? That was my question also. Thank you, Councillor. I'll let you ask the question.
Okay. Did they just go ahead and build it without checking? And is that legit? Or have they been slapped over the hand with a steel ruler?
Yeah, in order, yes, they did go ahead and build it. No, it's not legit, and yes, they have been slapped over the hand with a steel ruler. It shouldn't happen again, and in fact, it's unusual that it happened in the first place.
Okay.
Well, interestingly, we had one of these last year, but not from Vector, did we? Where they put an electrical cable under a park. Yeah. So is this becoming more common? That might be the second question. Is this becoming more common, and are we vigilant enough to make sure?
It's easier to ask for forgiveness than
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Whatever that saying is.
No, it's not. I mean, occasionally we get these slip-ups, but they're not common by any means.
Okay, right.
And can I ask another question? Is it true that their company motto is "It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission"?
We've just been through that at this end of the table.
Okay, so we did have a mover. We had a mover for this.
It was me.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And Councillor King seconded. Okay, so if there's no, is there any debate on? Okay, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Waikato Regional Services Fund is item number 18, which is the last item before we move into public excluded. And that is on page 188. I'll take the report as read and call for any questions.
Yeah, I've got questions.
Yes, Councillor King.
Is it true that regional council are going to rate every property in Hamilton for somewhere between $2.07 and $3.74?
Yep.
Is that correct?
As part of the consultation, there will be 3 options put forward, which is within that range for all ratepayers within the Waikato region.
So at the moment, the people of Hamilton are getting the service from our own council, is that correct?
What's on the table is for our regional emergency services, which includes the surf lifesaving, the Coast Guard, and some helicopter emergency services. Hamiltonians do get the benefit of that. But this council is currently not paying anything, so our ratepayers are currently not paying for that service via our rates. Does that answer that question, sir?
Even although we've given money to surf lifesaving?
Yes, we've provided money to surf lifesaving in the past as part of the annual plan process, long-term plan process. We made a decision not to make a contribution towards surf lifesaving because the intent was that the regional council at that stage would have been putting forward a proposal such as this. That didn't go through at the 10-year plan process, and it's only been recently discussed at the Waikato Mayoral Forum, and it's a proposal they're putting forward now, and they're looking for our support for that.
So our council's currently not providing any funding for this service?
There's nothing in the 10-year plan. If you recall, at the council meeting towards the end of last year, I discussed with council that with my delegation, I was going to contract some services with the lifesaving, surf lifesaving.
Yeah.
I can't remember what's the name of the region, the northern region or the west northern region, and I did do that, and that was a one-off contract, and it hasn't been approved by council for it to be repeated.
Thank you.
Question from Councillor Gallagher.
Just what happens at the Mayoral Forum meeting on the 22nd then? Just they decide, do they all go?
The Waikato Regional Council have discussed options, and they've had a myriad of options, and they've come down to 3 that they're testing with the Mayoral Forum to ensure that they're comfortable with those 3 options to go out for consultation.
Oh, so the Mayoral Forum will advise the Waikato Regional Council and give a comfort as to the 3 options that go out for a consultation process.
That is my understanding, yes.
Will that Mayoral Forum meeting be an open or enclosed confidential session?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't know those details.
I can tell you, it'll be closed and confidential, so much for open government, but the proposal's good.
Questions finished, Councillor?
Did you know the answer to that when you asked it?
You knew the answer to your own question.
I did. I did, but
Why ask it then?
Some of you who go on about open government should look at the Mayoral Forum, but that's another story.
Point.
I'm making a good point, but I know you endorse me, Councillor
Do we have any other?
I know Councillor Ewan wants to move
Order, please. I've got a question from Councillor Mallett and then Councillor, the Deputy Mayor.
I quickly skim through this report, so forgive me if it's written in here. So the proposal is for Waikato Regional Council to rate every of their citizens, as they already do. It'll come on the annual bill.
It's a region.
Yep, and then, okay.
It's quite clear.
Does that confirm that there is a contract between Waikato Regional Council and these entities? Or is it just the form of a funding arrangement? So is there, what's the degree to which there is any sort of quality assessment, contractual arrangement that a certain level of lifeguards will be available or availability of a helicopter?
Those details will be confirmed, and so the Waikato Regional Council is sure that these suppliers or these organisations aren't going to spend the money on something that's not deemed as on the ground services. Okay. So those things will be negotiated and agreed to and reported on.
Okay, and so at the moment we are supporting the idea of this we're supporting this to the Waikato Regional Council.
For public consultation.
For public consultation, okay. At what stage will we see the service agreements or whatever these things, how these things will be governed? The relationship between Waikato Regional Council and the Surf Life Saving Club and the helicopter and the...
We won't see them at all.
So, okay, so they will not be public documents? They'll be public documents?
They'll be between Waikato Regional Council and those entities.
Okay. So how does Hamilton City Council have any confidence that the service is relevant, appropriate, beneficial to our community?
Same as the velodrome, Gary.
I don't know how the velodrome works, so...
Every ratepayer in Hamilton got charged.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a relationship between the regional council and those providers.
Yeah.
The extent to which we have an opportunity to influence, I mean, it will be consulted on, they will consult on it, is my understanding, so there's an opportunity to see the documentation at that stage. I'll also provide copies of any specific contract for interest to councillors as well, because I'm as part of this process.
Okay, so just to be clear, the recommendation is the report we received, which, yep, council supports. So all this report does is say that we'll support this thing going ahead.
Yeah, so basically the regional council want to progress with this. They want to make sure it's something that we're interested in and that we support it. Doesn't cost us anything in terms of the council. Of course, it costs the ratepayers. There's a relationship between those ratepayers and the regional council.
Yeah. And the regional council will assume, well, there'll be great weight, I assume, put on the fact that the local authority in Hamilton, the Hamilton City Council, is supportive of this. That's one box they tick off in their consultation process, isn't it?
And hence the reason they're doing this.
But all we're doing is supporting their proposal. Yeah. Yeah. We're not supporting the idea, we're supporting their proposal to consult. So I've got Deputy Mayor next and then...
I was just going to signal I'm prepared to move when you're ready to...
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
And I'm prepared to second it too. It's a bit unfortunate it's come to this, but we've tried for ages to do it voluntarily, sort of have self-policing industry and the local government hasn't worked, so we have to go down this track because it's the only mechanism in place, except Gary's raised an important point about the governance decision-making once the fund's set up in that, which has to be done through the regional council, obviously. And there is another area, in the transport area, they can't make certain decisions over strategic roading or transport issues without going through a committee that formally includes each of the local authorities. And I would ask our management to work with EW, or whatever they call themselves nowadays, to maybe set up a distribution mechanism where other councils have some say in it, because it obviously is something that affects us, not over the consultation, the next step down the track. You should have your committee should comprise that meets once a year to decide how this is used, and should comprise representatives of local government.
I think that's a valid point, and maybe that's something, Richard, that you could write back to the...
Or you could, if you want to confirm it, throw in the resolution as well.
I don't know whether Gordon agrees.
Yep.
Well, would it be something subject to satisfactory governance arrangements being determined in the future? I mean, we're not going to do it now.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So we amend the recommendation that we support, council supports Waikato Regional Council's proposal to establish a regional fund,
Then after that, you'd have subject to.
subject to
Satisfactory governance arrangements being in
Yeah.
place,
Yep.
and
and
that's
the
open-ended
organised-
enough
yeah.
that no one knows what it means.
Don't you want
Well,
to say
then-
to our approval?
Pardon?
Don't you want to put in there to Hamilton's approval?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, to the satisfaction of Hamilton City Council, governance arrangements to the satisfaction of Hamilton City Council being in place. Because they're only asking for our approval at the moment, aren't they?
Well, they will have sent this letter off, I assume, to the
Oh,
other
but sorry,
PLAs, yeah, yeah.
but they'll be, they can put their own answer, response back in.
Sorry,
I
Chair.
think that's a reasonable request.
Yep, yep.
Chair?
Yep.
Just following on from Councillor Mallett, given the fact that this is going to embrace all of the local authorities in the regional council area, there may be a point in considering some form of representative panel specifically for those reasons. Otherwise, if we don't, we lose any input into that process. So I'm just raising that as a talking
I think
point.
that was what Councillor McPherson was alluding to, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just don't think we need to get into details here. We need to make sure the concepts
That
are
we've
produced and that staff go into bat for something along those lines.
So if you change
Not mad at
B,
you.
Councillor McPherson, if you change
On your
B
back if you don't.
to the Waikato Regional Services Fund and an appropriate governance.
Yeah, Gordon, I think that's what we put up there, subject to governance arrangements
Okay, that's fine.
being imposed. Are you happy with that?
Yep.
Yep. So we don't go into the detail, but at
Yeah,
least
no, it's
signal to them that there's a need for, okay, so who moved this?
Yeah, I did.
You're happy with the
Yep.
changes
No,
and,
second.
and Councillor McPherson second? Okay, is there any debate on the motion?
Yeah, okay, go.
We've got your playing and holding pattern.
You weak-kneed bastard, King. You capitulated immediately.
I've been holding for so long, I'm out of fuel.
Cross your legs.
Okay, I presume no one wishes to speak on the motion.
No, because Ewan will go, oh, again.
One further point, just.
Okay, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried, thank you. We now need a resolution to move into public excluded.
I'll move.
Thank you. I have a seconder, Councillor Jung.